Welcome to Super Context, a podcast autopsy of media.
How we consume it and how it informs our everyday culture.
I'm Christian Sager, a writer and a designer.
And I'm Charlie Bennett, a librarian and a radio raconteur.
Each episode is us trying to understand the entertainment world that we all live in.
Just a little bit better. Today's episode is about the comic book series Something is Killing the Children. This horror comic has achieved surprising success despite its gore and all the dead kids. We talk about the comic's creation and promotion, and we ask, is this all about trauma? Why aren't people talking about that?
You can find show notes for this episode on Patreon at patreon.com/supercontext. Or you can write us an email at supercontextpodcast@gmail.com. What was your trauma response to this comic book series? Avoidance? Hypervigilance, or resilience?
Or did you just think that Erica was cool? Hey everybody, a quick note about the podcast before we start. The writer of Something is Killing the Children. His name is spelled Tynion, and you could say that a couple different ways if you've only read it. We chose the wrong way to say it, and we realized that after everything was recorded, doing the QA, doing the quality assurance listen. And unfortunately, it's a quality we cannot assure to replace 50 to 100 iterations of a name mispronounced. So, James Tynion has the wrong pronunciation of his name throughout this episode. I apologize to everyone who knows better, and I am letting everyone who doesn't know better know we're going to program you the wrong way. It's James Tynion, not the way we say it. All right, on to the show, already in progress. I mean, the thing you got to remember, Chris, is that you suggested this comic to me.
I don't remember suggesting this comic to you. That's what's funny about it.
That's so strange. I didn't go back to listen to the episode. I hope that I am not misremembering.
It was on a podcast even? That's funny.
It was a mini-sode. We talked about, you know what? I know that you have a confession. So while you confess, I'm going to do a real-time lookup and see which mini-sode it was.
Well, okay. My confession is that before we even get into the meat of this episode, I feel like you're
supposed to say something about how you sinned and you're abject or something like that.
I'm not a Catholic or an Episcopalian. Is that what Episcopalians do?
Yeah, I am Episcopalian.
You have confessions too?
No, we don't have confession, but you're supposed to be sad about something.
I'm not sad, but I feel like this is a piece of subjective background that I should tell the listeners and you about before we get into this, because the premise of this show is that as much as possible, we try to be objective about the material that we're covering. Mm-hmm. My confession is that I have a lot of envy of James Tynion. He has the career in comics that I wanted to have. I'm jealous of that. He gets to operate independently. He writes compelling original horror series. He's able to work with some of the best artists in the business. He uses his platform to lift up other people around him. So it's interesting because as I spent a lot of time in independent comics and working on my stuff and trying to get it out there in the world, he was just like rising further and further up into the stratosphere. And I think his stuff is good. I'm hit or miss on some of it, but like for the most part, I think he's really good. I'm impressed with his work and his ethic. And this book I like, but I'm not as excited about as you are, which is why I find it surprising that you say that I recommended it to you. But that must have been 7 years ago now. This first came out in 2019.
This was October 26th, 2020.
Oh, you found when I recommended it to you.
Well, I found when we talked about it. What's interesting is that without listening to this, all I can find is that you mentioned it in your I am currently reading.
Okay.
And recommendation of the month, I still have listed here TK. That is to say, to come.
So that means that I didn't endorse it as my recommendation of the month. I just told you I was listening to it. Okay, so that's a little bit closer to how I feel about it now.
Here's how I remember it, not the words. I just remember you told me about this thing. I said, ooh, because the title.
Yeah.
And then you said, yeah, but it's good. Like that's the vibe I remember from that.
So let's pivot from that then to my question for you, which is for years on this show and privately, you've told me that you purposely avoid any content that has to do with violence against children,
Yeah.
specifically because you're a father and because it makes you think about the possibility of violence happening to your children. And I think that's why you had the response you did when I recommended it to you
Yeah.
five
Because my
years
kids were
ago.
very small at the time.
Yeah. So what changed?
Well, surely age is part of it. The age of my children, I mean. Uh, as they got older, it's not that I'm
You
less
wanted
afraid.
them to
Yeah,
die
right.
more.
Yeah. Thank you for not disappointing me, Chris. So my kids were 6 and 4 when you suggested this. And so I had, in a way, we'd gotten through infants and toddlers, and and they were more people now. They weren't, I mean, obviously kids are becoming themselves all the time.
Hmm.
And it wasn't like I was having conversations like, oh, how was your day with my 4 year olds?
Yeah.
But they were more themselves and less defenseless, good hearted, amazed at the world babies,
Mm-hmm.
which, I mean, I'm getting a little choked up just thinking about that time.
Hmm.
It's a very intense time. And I am now very much over the sort of hormonal magic of being a new parent.
Ah, okay. Okay.
You know, I've
Yeah.
I've read a lot of bullshit about this. So I have no idea if this is true, but it feels true.
Okay.
Once you have children, your male body starts to produce estrogen instead of testosterone.
I think I've heard this somewhere
Yeah.
as well, but I
Yeah.
don't know that the veracity of the
Part of
claim.
me
Yeah.
thinks that can't be true, but I do know that one breaks down into the other. I'm pretty
Hmm.
sure testosterone can break down into estrogen.
Okay.
And also, estrogen is the thing that elevates emotional response.
Hmm.
Yeah. And again, I don't know how any of this works. This all sounds like bullshit. But when you're crying at health insurance commercials, you
Hmm.
kind of know that something's going on with you, right? There's shit's fucked up in here. I
Yeah.
cried at the intro to Daredevil, the first Netflix television show.
Oh, okay.
Cried at
Yeah.
health insurance. I cried at Rick and Morty at one point. I mean, like,
Yeah.
it's intense. It's less intense now. It takes a lot more for me to burst into tears. It takes a what's his name? Guy who did BoJack Horseman. It takes a Raphael Bob Waxberg, whatever his name is. One of his shows will make me cry just like out of nowhere.
It sounds to me like you have more emotional energy, regardless of whatever the hormonal effects are, right?
Defenses.
Like, yeah,
Now
yeah.
I have more defenses. I had more emotional energy available, but I was not regulating it.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
now I'm more regulated when it comes to uh, outbursts of emotion and fear and worry. And I can imagine my kids making choices when confronted with a situation that I couldn't have imagined just 5 years ago.
Hmm. Hmm.
Anyway, long story short, too late. I think you caught me with that recommendation or just mention at the end of the process of being like, I cannot hear anything about kids in danger.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And also, I was like, I'm getting back into horror, right? This was This was the move. This was after we started the hiatus.
Right. I would say between, like during the hiatus, you really dove back in a lot more.
Yeah, it
Uh,
was the Stephen Graham Jones book and this, I think, that really mark my attempt to reconnect with horror literature.
cool.
Yeah.
Well, what is this? Let's get into the episode. You know,
Okay.
let's the audience is maybe like, I've never read this. What is this thing?
Well, I'm counting on them having listened to the intro a little bit.
Yeah, we haven't recorded that yet, but we will.
We will.
Yeah, we're
Okay.
operating in a different time zone.
Something is Killing the Children is a ongoing horror comic book started in 2019, written by James Tinian and drawn by Werther Deladera. I know I'm saying that wrong, and I apologize. It is about monsters that kill kids and who are hunted by monster killers.
Yeah, it's pretty basic. It's it is like it's Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but like rated R.
Yeah, it's that does understate the monster. The monsters are like
Yeah, you're
spider looking, claws and
hmm
teeth kind of monsters. They're not in closets. They are in ravines behind houses.
Yeah, yeah. So the thing that I learned doing the research about this, because I'd say I've probably read the first like 25 issues of this. I don't know where it's at right now. It's probably in the 40s, right?
Yeah, mid 40s.
Um, uh, this was originally only going to be a 5 issue limited series, which surprised me because by the end of the fifth issue, the story is nowhere near done.
Yeah,
But we learn why throughout the course of the research. Boom, the publisher, upgraded the title from a limited series to an ongoing monthly book even before number 1 was in shops. We'll talk about why there's a lot of big sales numbers that are thrown around as to why they made that decision. But when you read between the lines too of how Tinian tells that story, it sounds also like they had already sort of made a deal that it
yeah.
was going to be at least 15 issues long.
There's some nice process stuff coming up when Tinian
Hmm.
talks about how the idea became the proposal, became the scripts, became the ongoing series. Knowing this and going back and rereading the first 15 issues, and that's unofficially the artifact of
It's the first
today.
arc. I don't know
Yeah,
if they've collected it like that yet, but it's
they
the first
have. It's the
three
deluxes, the
volumes.
deluxe
Okay.
hardbacks, I
Ah,
think
okay.
operate at 15 issue
Gotcha.
chunks. So the story of Archer's Peak, which is the location that we first meet monsters and Erica Slaughter, the monster hunter, that's the story of the first 15 issues, and that's our core core artifact. But going back and rereading those with all of this research in my head, it was obvious now. Like, oh yeah, I see it. I see
Hmm.
all of the moves that he made, the attempt he made at this kind of drop in. We're not really about the monster hunter so much as we're about the victims, and it'll just be like a short and canceled Monster of the Week series,
Mm.
you know.
Hmm.
Uh, and also, it's very clear that some of the strength of those first rockin' 15 issues comes from how little world building there was.
Yeah, let's get into that. I think we're jumping a little ahead of ourselves. Let's talk about Tinian because we've mentioned him multiple times. We're talking about James Tinian the Fourth. That's his full name. He is the writer of this series, and he was born in 1987. He's from Milwaukee originally. He went to Sarah Lawrence for college, and while he was at Sarah Lawrence, he met comics writer Scott Snyder. Charlie, are you familiar with Scott Snyder?
I just see his name on the bindings of a lot of collections that I skip over.
He's kind of a rock star, or he was maybe like he's got sort of his height of like superhero comics has maybe passed a little bit, but he is very similar to Tinian in sort of achievement. After Tinian graduated, he became an intern at Vertigo under Shelley Bond, who we've talked about many times on the show. Shelley Bond is like this sort of glue between some of the like most influential comic book creators in the last 30 years.
Did you read her memoir, her
I did.
graphic
I
novel memoir?
Yeah, I kickstarted. I backed all three of her books like that on Kickstarter.
Yeah,
Yeah.
those are neat. I'll have to make a note of those somewhere for people to find.
Yeah, they are. They're well done. One of them is less of a memoir and more of like a
A
here's
how
her
to.
guide on how to edit
Yeah.
comics, and then but there's like memoir stuff in there, and then I think she just goes to full blown comics memoir. Yeah. So prior to writing Something is Killing the Children, Tinian made a name for himself by he started co-writing backup features in Batman with Scott Snyder. So this is where some of my envy comes in, right?
Yeah.
Like imagine you have never written a comic book before and someone's like, "Do you want to write a backup feature in Batman, the most popular book on the
It's
stands?"
even worse than that. Like it's the fantasy of my teacher saw potential in me
Yeah.
and said, "Come to the business and we'll do this together because you are such a good student." It's
Right.
Stellan Skarsgård putting his hand on the back of Matt Damon's neck after seeing the math in Goodwill Hunting.
Yeah. Yeah. So after he did those backup features, he continued to write Batman related books for DC probably for a decade or more. I'm not going to go through all of them, but he's written Batman. He's written, books related to Batman. There's probably 20 separate books that DC publishes a month that are Batman family
Yeah.
titles. Um, but at the same time, he started publishing creator-owned books, and Boom was sort of his home ground for that. He After writing Something is Killing the Children, which has really like cemented his name, I think, in creator owned
He says very
stuff.
explicitly, "This changed my career.
Yeah.
This was my pivot point."
He's really refocused on creator owned content. So some of the titles that he's done or are currently being published that are in that vein are The Department of Truth, World Tree, The Deviant, Exquisite Corpses. And then there's a series, it's sort of two series, The Nice House on the Lake and The Nice House on the Ocean is the
Yeah.
follow up series.
And that's Image Comics and the Vertigo, the creator owned Vertigo
Yeah.
imprint, which
Hmm.
is a recent development. And maybe there's some more Boom in there. Like he has a wide footprint on the indie comic industry.
The first time he really caught my attention, he did this series of miniseries, which sounds weird, that were, I might get all the titles wrong. There was Memetic, Eugenic, and I think it's Cognetic, and they were each 3 issue miniseries, and each one was a horror miniseries sort of around a similar theme, with different characters. And it was just, it knocked my socks off. I was like, oh, wow, like this made me sit up and pay attention.
So was he doing what you had always imagined you would do? Or did
Yeah.
he give you a model that then you were like, oh, I kind of want to be doing this?
No. It's funny, when I started doing comics in 2008, I would say the model for how to quote break into comics, of
Mm-hmm.
course that's silly, there's all different ways, was make a name for yourself doing self-published independent work your way up to doing creator owned books for publishers like Dark Horse or Image or all the people he's working with, Boom. And then you would gain enough notoriety from that that you would be hired by DC or Marvel. You would get paid a decent paycheck, and you would, maybe write 4 books a month, and 2 of those would be work for hire, and that would,
Yeah.
pay your bills, and then the other 2 would let you be creative.
So I'm laughing right now because it just popped in my head. Oh, right. The Gen X fantasy of you can work in the mailroom, except it's not the mailroom and they don't pay you. The
Hmm.
mailroom is your off time. You go home and work in the mail room of your industry after you leave your day job.
Yes, and I would say what I just described to you worked for less than 10 people. Um, and everybody else, was not left behind. That's not fair, but like, that model wasn't a one
Yeah.
size fits all
Everybody
model.
else split their attention between making a living and doing their art and tried to
Exactly.
be a star early on. They fight clubbed it.
Yes. And I would say, too, this is not the topic of this episode, and it took me a long time to come to terms with this myself as a writer. The not only the industry of comics, but the overall like production industry of anything creative changed so drastically over the last 20 years
Mm-hmm.
that it has become increasingly difficult to make a living off of being creative in any field.
What's been going on the past 20 years?
Oligarchs and the five stacks and the consolidation of content.
Oh my
I
gosh,
guess
this is
that's
totally
how
like Family Feud here because I was looking for internet.
that's the easiest way to say it. Yeah.
Yeah. um, so also,
Ironically, you and I, before we got on air, spent 10 minutes talking about how Grok is going to be the downfall of Twitter. And
well,
I'm
the end of
sure,
the downfall
yeah,
of as Empty Wheel calls it, shitter.
yeah.
Uh,
But that is the end stage capitalism of
Jesus
what we've been
Christ.
going
Yeah.
through for 20 years. Yeah.
We should say to everyone, we're recording on January 12th. And a lot of shit
2026.
has happened recently. And who
Yeah.
knows? A lot more shit might happen before we put this episode out in February. So we are not ignoring the start of World War III. It just hasn't happened yet.
Oh, oh, I hope you're wrong, but
I hope
yeah,
I'm wrong too.
that's what I thought a week ago. All right, so actually, let's go back to another crisis
Yeah,
within the last
speaking of
5 years.
world-changing
Perfect
events,
segue. So, while Tinian was, building this creator-owned empire, um, COVID fell in 2020, and he launched a 5 issue horror anthology series with Steve Fox during that time called Razor Blades. And it was rumored that I'm telling you this is not in the research. This is like me having friends in the industry, some of whom were in Razor Blades,
people
uh,
talking at conferences.
over text. It was rumored that he paid creators out of his pocket before the issues were pre-ordered and the collection was published.
Okay, hold on that.
Yeah.
Just wait a moment. So if he was born in 87, then he's what, mid 30s when this is happening? Is that right? Am I doing
Yeah,
my math right?
he's 10 years younger than me, so that means
Okay.
that he's 38 right now. So that would have been 5 years ago. He would have been 33.
Okay. So a 33-year-old comic writer paying for 5 issues worth of a horror anthology out of pocket. This does not sound like regular money. This sounds like somebody who has something else going on.
Well, I mean, let me restate. It's a rumor.
Okay.
I don't know that it's true. And even the people who worked on the book don't know, they were just like, I think this is what's going on, but I'm not sure. Like, where's the money coming from? So he
Yeah.
didn't crowdfund that book, is what I'm saying. Like,
Yeah.
and there was no publisher behind it.
Is he a landlord? Is he doing real estate on the side?
Who knows? But I will also say we're going to get into the numbers on Something is Killing the Children in a little bit. And if he's got a good deal with Boom and
It
it's
is
selling
creator
as
owned,
many
yeah.
issues as they say it is, then maybe he had some extra scratch to use,
Yeah.
Who
Okay.
knows? But
Following that,
that
sorry.
sounds very, I just want to say, like, that's extremely generous.
It is.
And the mission of Razor Blades was very noble too, in that it was a horror anthology. He wanted to get more comics out there, but he's stated like he really wanted to have a platform for who he thought were like the up and coming voices in
Mm-hmm.
horror comics, and he wanted to help people get paid at a period of time where they weren't getting work because
Yeah.
COVID was knocking the industry on its ass.
It is ethical,
Yeah.
to pay for work that you expect to resell. You should
Hmm.
pay up front.
Yeah, and I don't know what the sales numbers are on razor blades. Like, who knows if he made his money back? But he had an interesting business model with that. Like, he did pre-orders digitally, so you could buy all the comics digitally, and then I think they printed them as single issues. Maybe a year later, after they had their digital sales were used to pay for the print run, and then they Image published the big collection of all of it.
Mm-hmm. So then the next year, he continued to not exactly innovate, but he continued to expand and push. He was part of a group of creators who formed a deal with Substack to publish creator-owned stories on that platform. And he launched some more comics that I only found out about recently when I was doing more like poking around in his
Oh, really?
home, not home studio, but his indie studio website.
Yeah,
Uh,
he I don't think that's in the notes here, but he around the same time he launched his own like mini publishing house called Tiny Onion.
yeah, and that's where Blue Book and The Closet are. And you have another piece of rumor.
Well, this was less of a rumor and more of like it was pretty well known that this is the case about this Substack deal, but Substack paid the creators involved in this for the first year of their involvement a significant chunk of money. Like nobody has said like it was X dollars, but it was enough for somebody like Tinian to say, "Okay, I'm not going to make any other comics this year. I'm only going to focus on Substack."
Yeah,
Other than what he was already writing, like Something is Killing the Children, or I think he might have been doing a Sandman book or something. But yeah, they paid very well to this initial group of creators. And I mean, that was 4, 5 years ago now. I don't know. To be honest, I stopped following the whole thing. Like, there was a minute there where I followed maybe 3 or 4 of those Substacks. And I don't know that the project worked for me necessarily.
yeah.
And that said, also, I don't know that they're all still going either.
Well, this is very rough, but the pandemic fueled a boom. Like
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
Substack quadrupled its users in 2020 and 2021, something like that.
Yeah.
That there was a ton of money available at that time. Like this was the rocket taking off for Substack in
Yep.
2021.
Yeah, and it was, you sort of made a vomiting noise when their name came up, but it I remember when this happened, there was a lot of debate of like, well, there's Nazis on Substack. Why are these people taking these deals? And there was a lot of like questioning of them. I don't know. I don't remember where it all landed or anything. I think the whole like Nazi thing has gotten significantly worse in the last 4 or 5 years on
It certainly
there.
feels that way. It does
You
feel
know
like that.
what? I don't even need to say on there.
No,
It's just gotten significantly worse.
it does feel like the Nazi bar joke or the Nazi bar allegory fits Substack pretty well.
I don't know that bar allegory, but you can
Oh,
tell me
okay.
later.
So I can't properly credit this, but here in general is the story. Guys at a bar, everything's fine, and a dude in like Nazi skinhead gear walks in. He sits down at the bar. He's not making any trouble, but the bartender's just like, nope, out, out, out. He's got a bat out, and he chases the guy out. The guy's like, I'm not doing anything. I'm not doing anything. He chases him out. So then the storyteller says, whoa, do you know that guy? He's like, no, but that's how it works. They come in, one comes in, doesn't make a problem, just hangs out, doesn't bother you. You leave them alone because you're like, okay, I'm going to leave this person alone because they're not hurting me. And then they have a friend who comes and they're fine, and a third one. And then next thing you know, you are the Nazi bar.
I have heard this. I
Yeah.
just didn't know that's what you're referring to. Yes, I think that is very apt.
Mm-hmm.
Good observation.
Boy, we are all over the fucking place here.
Yeah, we are, but that's okay. I think that might be what this podcast is now. Um, let's get back to this.
I like
So,
that you're trying to say that it's that now, Chris. This
I think you and I uh, love doing this show, but also the media that we're observing lends itself to us venting about the issues of the current day through between the lines.
there is a therapeutic side to these recordings, and
Hmm.
people should know. I mean, I cut shit out too that we're talking about. This
Yeah.
is just the stuff that makes it in because it's sort of related to the podcast.
One last thing about the Substack stuff. So, Dark Horse publishes most of the books. He starts out on Substack. So this is kind of interesting, right? Because I just want to point this out as an observation, nothing like accusatory. There is a lot of conversation coming up where he talks about how important Boom is to him as a publisher and how they let him do what he wants, and it's where he's found his home. But I would say a lot of the things we just talked about are not through Boom. Like we just mentioned, the Substack books are through Dark Horse. Razor Blades was self-published and then through Image. I think almost all of the books that we just mentioned as creator-owned stuff are Image or Vertigo. So Boom is not his only home.
Yeah, if I pop up his bibliography,
Hmm.
just the Wikipedia version, I get Boom Studios, then a lot more titles in the DC Comics, and
Hmm.
then Distillery, a couple titles,
Oh
IDW,
yeah.
a couple titles. Image has less than Boom, Marvel Comics just a couple, Thrillbent, and that's early on.
Thrillbent was a online only publisher that lasted, gosh, maybe a year. Yeah.
Okay, that was back in
That was the first thing I read by him. He did this book called The Eighth Seal on
2014.
Thrillbent that was
It's
pretty
listed right here.
interesting. Yeah.
And then Tiny Onion Studios, which is his, that has four titles.
Okay. So, okay, we've given you an overview of this guy's career, kind of what his project is overall. Let's get into Something is Killing the Children because I think everybody involved in the creation of this would describe him as the motivating force. We will talk about the art and the coloring and the lettering and all that. But a lot of this is based on his decisions.
Yeah. Tinian said that the title is something that existed for a long time. Here's a direct quote. The first thing that was ever titled Something is Killing the Children was a short story I wrote while I was in college. And he does say it was no good and has nothing to do with the comic today. But the title was created at that moment. And then he says, with every stage of my career, it's something that I've been thinking about for long form projects. I'd always write it on the list. What do you think that list is?
If it's anything like my list, it's a long list of project ideas that you use to prioritize what you're going
Yeah.
to tackle next. Yeah.
Every time it would come to the forefront, the story would change and shift. I knew there was a kind of power to it that I would want to come back to. I think it's very evocative. And I think that's true. The title is evocative and a little bit creepy, but also a little bit twee, a little bit
Yes.
arch.
Yes.
There's a kind of dread and a mystery right there in the title, he says, that really embodies the sort of horror that I've always gravitated towards. And I'm excited that I finally get to bring it out into the open.
So let's talk about the concept here. Like I said, it was originally outlined to be a 5-issue miniseries. And he describes it himself as disjointed. And the idea, again, Charlie used this term earlier. It's such a common term. There's a role playing game with this title now because it's its own subgenre now. It was a Monster of the Week book.
Yeah.
Every issue was going to be a standalone one shot where the character of Erica would come to a town, kill a monster, and then it would be from the perspective of a different random person who was witnessing her coming to town and doing this. He wanted it to be his version of what he calls the weird interstitial issues of Hellblazer or Sandman. Um,
Did you ever read the James Bond books?
the prose books. No, I have not. In fact, remember we did an episode about that? Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
I remember that we did, yeah, when Van Jensen
Yeah.
adapted. But as a lead in question, Chris, I was just asking, have you ever read those Ian Fleming books?
I haven't.
So one of them is called The Spy Who Loved Me, and it is a first person story from a woman's perspective who is like, I don't know, staying at a motel somewhere in America, in,
Hmm.
maybe the Midwest. I'm getting details wrong, but James Bond shows up and we get her story of how she yeah, met James Bond and went to bed with him and was part of the adventure he was in, and then he disappears.
Okay.
So this
Yeah,
is
I
way
like
back when.
that. I like that structure to a story that I know exactly what he's talking about. Not just Hellblazer and Sandman, but there's been some really good comic stories over the years of like iconic characters, but the story is told from the perspective of a normal person
Yeah.
that they just whiz in and out of their lives, you know?
And usually that seems like something you do when you've got an ongoing series and you're sort of breathing
Yeah.
some life into it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
he just started by saying, I wanted to do that kind of thing.
But what changed was he saw Werther's designs for Erica Slaughter, the protagonist, and he said the character was something that he thought deserved more than 3 pages in an issue. And so he started writing the first issue, and he says, I did a little trick that's often shorthand for me, which is I was writing this truth or dare sequence with these young boys in Milwaukee, and I plugged in my name and the name of my 4 closest friends from freshman year of high school into the characters. I knew all of them. I knew them backwards and forwards, and of course I knew my young self in this big, powerful way. And then I started doing the pacing of the issue, and I thought, I've spent some time in this truth or dare scene and all of this stuff. I can't resolve this whole thread in one issue and then get out. He writes his editor over at Boom, whose name is Eric Harburn. He essentially said, I'm going to go from the first issue being set in this town to the first 5 issues are set in this town to the first 15 issues are
Yeah.
set in this town. And this is a moment where I want to pause here too. This is where my envy comes through, right? Not a lot of creators get to do that. Like, not a lot of creators get to go, I don't know. I think I want to make this 3 times as long as I said it was going to be originally, you know?
Well, he says uh, that Boom declared advanced sales to be high enough that they would give,
Yeah.
as he quotes, we will give you the road of 15 issues. Here's the thing. I both relate to this completely and also feel the same way you do. How did this happen? How did someone who got a contract to do 5 standalone get the investment, get the leeway to just do whatever they wanted? I have tried to plot comic books, and that shit's hard. Uh, and I've found that my stories would change when confronted with the limited number of pages and the
Hmm.
limited number of beats available due to those pages. And I totally get, like, he used 4 pages, 5 pages for the truth or dare game. It's like, oh, I've already used up all of my setup and I
Yeah.
haven't even killed a kid yet.
I maybe this is why he's successful and I'm not. Like the way that I approach it is from the get-go, I know the form and I know how many issues, how many pages, and you break the story down from there. You say, okay, I've got 3 issues. There's 22 pages in each issue. Then I break down each of those, and then from within there, you block your scenes. How many pages am I going to give each of these scenes? And I think this is awesome. Like I think that's what makes this a good story, right? Is that he was like, no, I'm not feeling that. I'm feeling it's a little more pantser than plotter, right? Like,
Yeah, it's also interesting that if you read between the lines on that truth or dare sequence, he's like, I had a setup. The way that I was going to get into the story was
hmm.
sleepover, truth or dare. The dare gets them back into the woods where they're murdered.
Yeah, yeah.
And in order to give life to that and to kind of quickly build the characters for himself so he could write them, he made them himself and his friends. Like he made it autobiographical with no truth to the surroundings.
And we're going to talk more about that later
Yeah.
too. That like I don't even remember, 6-page sequence, like it seems to be like a linchpin for this whole
Oh, it's
series.
great. Yeah. It seems like a real thing. It's got a lot of history to it. It feels like you dropped in on something that's been happening.
Hmm.
And when he made it autobiographical, suddenly he couldn't do it quick.
Yeah.
Right. Now he
Yeah.
had to write more to say honor the autobiography. I can't resolve this in 5 issues. You could definitely joke that what he was unable to resolve in 5 issues was his youth.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Um, I just think that, it shows that at different stages of people's careers and how much influence they have in the market, they can make different choices about style and form,
Yeah.
which I think is sort of what we're trying to get to at the heart of this show. Like, how does this thing work? How does its heart beat? One of the things he says here is that his primary influence for this is Stephen King, and that two of King's books, which you and I have talked about frequently, are his favorite and influences on this, It and Pet Cemetery. And those are both definitely books that deal with child murder.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we've talked about this over the years, like when we do some of our King stuff over on the Patreon. We've done a few public King episodes, but those were significant moments for Stephen King. Like even though those books sold really well, there was a certain kind of darkness to them with the really vivid death of children in
Yeah.
those stories that disturbed him and his readers. People still bought the books. I don't know necessarily anybody like protested Pet Cemetery, but he still, I think, talks about Pet Cemetery as being like his most uh like toxic, sort of
Yeah.
morbid book.
Yeah. I remember reading it as I read all Stephen King books too early, and I was demolished.
You were.
Oh,
Even
yeah.
and you were probably a child yourself.
Yeah. I was, God, I bought it in a hospital waiting room when my grandfather was in the hospital for one of many surgeries and,
Hmm.
organ failure kind of things. And so I'm reading fucking Pet Cemetery in the lobby of a hospital. And my mom comes down and she's all fried from watching her dad in this
Yeah.
situation, and I didn't even know what I was getting into. Then, like 3 days later, I'm reading it again and the kid dies.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, I think something we'll talk about later when we get into sort of the themes and what kind of meaning to make from this book. There's a huge difference culturally between then and now.
Yeah.
In that, yes, this is dark, but it seems to be readily accepted. Nobody seems to blink an eye at the idea of this comic book that's about child murder.
Well, in a very subjective way, just the imagery of this is very comic booky
Mhm.
and sort of abstracted and almost stripped of gore details. Like
Yeah.
certainly it's clear, yes, this body has been ripped apart,
Hmm.
but you're um, not getting the sort of slasher film details.
Yeah. There's a scene in this book, spoilers, I guess. I'm not going to give too much away, but like a little girl gets killed in front of like 20 adults,
Yeah,
and her body gets lifted up in the air and she gets bisected. And the way that it's drawn is like a literal bisection. Like the two parts of her body are separated, but there aren't like intestines and blood and bone spraying and connecting the two parts, right? Like it's pretty, I know what you mean when you say
yeah.
abstract. Yeah.
The details are particular, and in fact, just to get back to now Tinian and sort of how the writing developed, the things he talks about that he connected with the artist that developed the story are these details that are not viscera, these details that are not the violence. He says, I mentioned, oh, the council of these hunters, these monster hunters, they're all wearing bandanas and they all have stuffed animals. Or he says, looking at Erica, our monster hunter, she has hair covering one of her eyes, and her temple has a horrifying scar, this haggard look that's both standoffish and unassuming. The details of the face, the details of the clothing, the sort of little things that make this more real are counterbalanced to the kind of not graphic but visceral depictions of
Hmm.
violence and death.
I think that that is what makes good horror storytelling. What creates a quality, compelling horror story isn't a lot of detail about the violence.
Right.
It's a lot of detail about the characters so that um you feel enough identification with them that when something threatens them or something bad happens to them, you have an emotional reaction.
And that's a little bit of the special nature of something is killing the children. And here's a description from Tinian of how it focuses on something slightly different. When you talk about it from the most top level perspective, this is a story about a monster hunter arriving in a town to hunt monsters. It feels like this is an action horror comic, but that is not what this is at all. It's a story that moves through the trauma and the melancholy and the helplessness that this town is feeling. The only solution that comes their way is something they can't understand, and they can't fully accept that. And that means that a monster hunter comes to help them deal with the fact that their children in the town are being killed. The thing they're going to have to allow to solve the problem is something they might never understand. There is so
Yeah.
much to this comic that is about how people see or feel the results of violence
Hmm.
and the results of the death of family members and community members. You're They clearly didn't follow through on the, oh, Erica will only show up in 2 or 3 pages and then disappear again,
Hmm.
but it does keep the focus off the monster themselves. We don't get monster cam, following victims, and
Hmm.
we always head back to townspeople who are suffering for Erica to come interact with. We're not really following Erica from beat to beat of her hunt.
Yeah, there's somewhere in here, it might not have made it into the notes, where he compares this to Twin Peaks. And I had a little trouble with that because I don't see that. But I think what he meant was that it's a character piece with a big cast.
Yeah, the thing that happens brings stuff out of people. It's less about what is this murder? What is this monster? And much more
Yeah.
about how are people dealing with this murder? How are people dealing with this monster? That's a little bit of you get to do this because it's creator owned and you're the one who's risking more than the studio and that kind of thing. And you don't have to go by the style manual of the character or, the particular big publisher you're working with.
Right. Yeah. He talks about like the difference between writing Erica as a character and Batman or Superman, and that in a way, like she is a comic book character. I don't like that term. I shouldn't say that, but like, she's a genre character. Let's put it that way. She arrives to save the day, and she's kind of a superhero in her own way. But he says like he sees more to her than that, especially like once he saw the art that there was
Yeah.
like she became I think came alive for him.
She has trauma from her actions. She has wounds and
Yeah.
she's beat up, and her herodom is a burden.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about his writing process a little bit here. So he says when he was working on Batman and his other DC work, those were projects he was willing to compromise on. But while he was working on those books, he was sort of learning more about the process and he was taking notes. And then he says, creator owned work is where I knew that I would be able to tell the sorts of stories that really spoke to me and expressed who I was. At that moment in my career, I was mostly working with other writers and stuff like that. I think what he means is like he was co-writing with Scott Snyder.
Yeah, he was working in arcs that were
Yeah.
already established.
I really didn't have the opportunity to show people my personality and my core interests. I knew I wanted to do horror stories, and I knew I wanted to tell stories that tapped into the deep emotions that in my early 20s still carried over from my high school years.
What do you think of that, Chris? That stopped you dead. What just happened?
I think what it makes me wonder is he's clearly written himself into this book, as we've hinted at and we'll discuss further. And this book is about trauma, building resilience, and surviving trauma. So it makes me wonder what trauma did he experience? It sounds like something happened in high school that he has then been processing
Yeah.
since he was in his 20s.
Are you
Um,
do you want to hold that back or should we talk about it right now?
oh, you think there's more to talk about?
Well, I think that Tinian is identified as a queer writer.
Yes. Yeah.
And, if his coming out was in the 90s or the early 2000s, certainly that's different than having to come out in the 50s, but it wasn't smooth, I'm sure, especially if he,
Yeah.
is coming from the Midwest.
I
Yeah.
don't know. I feel like we're speculating.
Yeah,
Like I, I,
totally.
I don't know. Maybe he's told that story somewhere else, like in an interview or even in a comic. So I don't feel comfortable like assuming that's what it is. I
Gotcha.
did I did think it might have something to do with that, sure. And like that's both clearly an important part of his identity and part of his writing too. Like he makes an effort to include queer characters in most of his work. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but also, I don't know if, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I guess I'm just reading that quote and thinking, like, to use the metaphor of monsters, like coming to town and killing dozens of children, like that trauma sounds like it's deep.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's hard to segue from that to whether you outline or just make it up as you go along, but I'm going to do it. Okay. So, talking about how he writes
Yeah.
and how he develops plot lines, he says that over the course of writing the first year of another ongoing series, The Woods, that he wrote before this, I realized that my outline was wrong. And I realized, even more importantly, the character that I was building up to be the main villain of the series, the one that was going to carry us through all 36 issues of the run, I realized he needed to die in issue 12. And I had no idea what was going to happen to the story after that. I threw out the roadmap. And ever since then, I've always been really hesitant about doing those kinds of super detailed outlines, at least until I'm much further into a project. I always know what's happening in the next few issues, but there's always room to maneuver, which is literally what happened to Something is Killing the Children.
Yeah.
He had an idea, he had a structure that he had to throw out because of some aspect of the story that really pulled him in,
Yeah.
something that
Yeah.
caught him and changed it from an experiment, a little genre experiment, and turned into something that he was in. His personality, his ideas, his influences, his deep emotions.
He talks a little further here too about his not just like whether he outlines or just kind of writes from the seat of his pants, but that where the ideas come from, like what draws him into a story. And he says, oftentimes I don't know. I'm researching a project for months. I'll be in a mode where I'm basically putting together, it sounds like he's said ideas here. He reads a bunch of books. They're all about one subject, but he hasn't quite put together why he's reading them. And then maybe he'll be reading one of those books or he'll be listening to a strange album And there's some discordant connection to that book, and suddenly an image or a scene pops into his head. And he says he realizes that he has the seed for something that he wants to explore. I like this. It's similar to how I find my own ideas. Um, Ray Bradbury has this concept that he came up with in one of his, I think it's his only book on writing, but that there's sort of a stream of consciousness that you can create between words or objects or songs or books or whatever. What he would do, he would like write like a list of words out on a sheet of paper, and then he would try to figure out how to connect those words together, and that would be like his impetus for a short story.
Because he would just write what came to mind.
Yeah.
And like, oh, this is what I'm thinking about. So why am I thinking about all these things?
Like how to get his subconscious to rise to the surface. What David Lynch calls like
Yeah.
um uh, going for the big fish, going deep for the big fish, right? And it sounds like this is kind of what Tinian is doing as well.
Yeah. It's funny. He says, maybe I'll be reading one of those books and I'll hear something on a record at the same time that creates an image or a scene. And then he says, or even a feeling. But then the feeling is what he continues to describe through the rest of his explanation. He leaves behind image and scene and says, I try to lean into the central feeling of the thing. And then the moment that I go out there finding the person I want to co create this world with, I assume is the artist, it's finding someone who I am going to be aligned with to tap into that central vibe and feeling. Because if we don't agree on the central feeling of the story, then the story is not going to work. It's almost like he's saying that the point of any of this is to create an emotion or a feeling that he's going to get the reader to experience too.
Interesting. I think I've told the audience this, you know this, but I'm in a movie club, and the movie club is going through all of the top 100 movies on Sight and Sound's best of list. They
Mm-hmm.
do one every decade, and a lot of the movies on that list are non-traditional storytelling, non-linear narratives that are focused more on generating feeling than they are on story and plot and what we typically think of when we think of movies in America. And sometimes that's done through sound, sometimes it's done through texture, the way that the lens is, framed. And I'm just thinking about that quote from Tinian and how it's trickier to do that in comics. It's difficult to just generate a feeling in your reader.
Yeah, but it is the same in movies in that you have to find collaborators.
Mm,
It takes a special situation for you to be able to do everything by yourself.
yeah, yeah. All right, let's segue from Tinian and talk about the artist. So I want to note here that I think we'll have all of our research links in the show notes. There's
Mm-hmm.
got to be at least 15, maybe 20 articles that we turn to. Werther Deledria is barely mentioned in any of those articles. They're very heavily focused on the writer, and that I've mentioned before, like within the comics community of creators, there is a real bone to pick over that. That like the industry kind of swings one way or the other. It's either very artist focused or very writer focused. It's never sort of looking at them both as like co-creators, literal co-creators. Um, so it's interesting. I wonder if part of that is because he's Italian, and maybe like English is a second language for him. But here's what I found, and then Charlie thankfully went and got something for us to turn to that has a lot more information about him that was not readily available.
I do want to say before you get into it, um, Deladera, that's how I'm going to say it, Deladera, he is pretty deferential to Tinian in
Yes.
talking about this work. So there might be a little bit of, I tried to interview Bob Weston, the bass player from Shellac. And I
I'm
sent him an
familiar.
email saying, I
He's a
have a radio
defender of
show.
fun.
Can I interview you? I've interviewed Ian Mackay and Steve Albini. Can I interview you now?
Hmm.
And he said, no, I don't like to talk the way those guys like to talk.
Good for him.
Good for him, indeed.
Yeah.
But that is the vibe I get off of Deladera. I get sort of a, yeah, I draw the pictures. I'm good at it. That's what I like.
All right. I'm going to speculate a little here.
Do it.
Not all creator owned contracts are written equally.
Mm,
Okay.
okay.
So it is possible that this is not a 50-50 split. Um, I don't know. I'm not, it's not like I know anything. But the way Deladera talks in these interviews, it makes me think that he feels like he's a hired gun.
Okay.
Um, so he's an Italian comic book artist. He was born in 1975. Before this, he worked on comics for Vertigo and Marvel in the English speaking market. He's worked for a lot of different Italian based publishers. Business Insider, of all magazines, did a profile on him. Um, and it was kind of a like, here's a day in the life of a comic book artist.
Huh.
And it was cool. He says some writers that he works with give him more details for what they want to see than others, and that Tinian gives him more freedom than he's seen. And he said, especially after we'd already done 20 issues,
Yeah.
like he's sort of come to trust me. But then he says he's still the one with the ideas,
Yeah.
which that's one of those moments where I was like, are you not allowed to have ideas? You know,
Yeah.
but maybe
Or
again, maybe it's like a translation thing.
yeah. Or the other speculation is he just enjoys doing the work and doesn't need to talk about, you know, well, let me back up on that actually. That to me, he's still the one with the ideas. It sounds like I get the scripts and then I do stuff based on what he's done. I think there's a little bit of saying essentially, without him, I wouldn't be doing this.
Maybe, yeah. Yeah. So throughout this Business Insider profile, he talks about his process. He reads the script, he draws layouts of the pages with the script in front of him. He said that takes about a couple days. He specifically draws it digitally on an iPad. He uses Procreate for that. Sometimes he inks his pages traditionally, and then he prints them out and traces over the digital drawings. I have friends who do that. Mostly, my friends who do that do it so they have something that they can sell at shows.
Yeah.
Yeah, he said in general it takes him about a day to do each page. He did this interview with a site called Pages and Panels, where he talked about, he grew up loving comic books, and that started because of animated television shows. His big influence was the 1960s animated Spider-Man TV show, which I also grew up on.
Yeah, he's roughly my age, so I
Yeah.
I feel that so strongly. The animated Spider-Man show.
Yeah. And then he said when translated modern American comics made their way to Italy, he couldn't get enough. Yeah, they talked to him a little bit more about his influences. He named some artists that influenced him. And then the writer, not Deledria or Deladera, sorry, um, comments on the style of his art, and he calls it textured line work with gray tones to emphasize dynamic moments, emotions, and intense fights. Something I noticed about this book, and I don't know if this is, I read it digitally. Um, I don't know if this is intended or maybe it was just the format that I was reading it in. Maybe the resolution was too low for my screen. There's a slight blur.
Yes, I think that's true. And I read them in print, and I don't think it's about resolution. I think maybe it's something to do with the way that the colors. I,
Yeah, I
I
wondered if it happened at the coloring stage. There's just kind of a softness to it.
yeah, I like it. It doesn't look out of focus. It just looks like the contrast is not turned up.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, he says his art style is a product of an entire life of experience, and that he's always trying to grow. And that could be him looking at old Jack Kirby Captain America comics or Japanese horror comics. Now, this is interesting. The two of them, Tinian and Della Adera, have developed what he refers to as rodato, which is an Italian way to describe a working method that is fluid and runs smooth. Um, that's cool. I like that as a little term. I don't know much more about rodato than that, but
All right, I'm gonna regret this, but I've popped up a AI overview of
oh,
Rodato.
Jesus. Okay. Yeah.
Rodato primarily means run in, broken in, or road tested for machinery and vehicles. Figuratively, it means tried and tested, well oiled, or well adjusted.
Interesting.
I think
Okay.
this is a groove. They have a groove.
Nice. Little groove. Um, Tinian comments on him as an artist. This is the only quote I saw in all the pieces that I looked at. Uh, he says the thing that sold him on the art, and so this is another thing that makes me think that the contract is maybe weighted in Tinian's favor. He comments that there were multiple artists that he and the editor from Boom like tried out,
Yeah.
which is not normally how, at least my understanding is not normally how creator owned books work, right? Like normally you come as a package to the editor, not you and the editor go looking for someone. And he said that they were looking at multiple artists and that what sold him on this artist was a picture of a gas station. And he said he loved how he drew characters. He captured humanity and there was a style that felt grounded.
Yeah. The quote from him is he said, okay, this is the person that can draw the type of world that something is killing the children needs to exist in.
I think what we can take away from that is more of what we heard during the writing section, which is that this is a character focused story.
And a feeling focused
Yeah,
story. It's a
yeah,
it's a machine to evoke an emotion. Like
right.
a picture of a gas station, that just makes me think of Nighthawks at the diner, or excuse me, Nighthawks, the Edward Hopper picture. That
Hmm.
it just delivers an emotion, and if it were drawn in a different way, it probably wouldn't. Right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I pulled most of the research yesterday. I spent a couple hours on it, and I told Charlie I was like, there isn't that much on the art. I couldn't find a lot. And I was driving to work this morning and I was like, oh wait, like panel by panel does these like deep dive research focused issues on certain comic book series. I bet they did one on Something is Killing the Children, but I've been working all day. So Charlie kindly purchased this issue and then pulled the research out of it for us. So I'm somewhat unfamiliar with this. So lead us on.
Okay. So panel by panel is a regular magazine that has one half dedicated to a particular work
Yeah.
and one half dedicated to regular features that are not connected to that particular work. So the March 2020 issue of Panel by Panel, number 32, was dedicated to Something is Killing the Children. So this is, gosh, I think less than a year since it was released. Didn't it come out
Yeah.
summer of 2019?
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah. This
Um,
is literally this issue was released when COVID started
okay,
lockdown.
well, hang tight on that. So the actual date is February 26th. So
Okay.
the work that went into it definitely happened before that.
Yeah.
So do not read into it
Oh, okay.
that COVID is happening, even though it's going to feel like it is. Okay. And there was a conversation that was presented as kind of a round robin, where Tinian, Deladera, I've forgotten the colorist's name. I have it down here.
Mikel
Mikel
Muerto.
Muerto and then Darren Bennett, who is the letterer.
Two N's, two T's.
Two N's, two T's. He's my cousin. Um, they all talked about the process. The interviewer asks Werther, do you have a sense as to what kind of genre or story you feel your art is most effective? Your scratchy lines and hatching feel so at home with this kind of unsettling horror, for example. But Deladera says, I'm not sure if there's a specific genre that my style thrives in. I've worked in very different genres and I found myself comfortable with each of them. So I can't tell you which is the best genre for my style, but I can tell you for sure that if you find my style particularly at home with this kind of story, well, my mission is accomplished. And that, I mean, there's a lot of information in the interview, but
Mm.
that to me summed up the kind of we're all following Tinian's lead aspect to this project.
Yeah, and it's also just kind of extraordinarily humble in that he's just like, I don't know. Well, like if you liked it, that's good by me.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
just like drawing, you know?
I do feel like behind a lot of this is I don't really want to talk about this.
Well,
I mean, I'm here, but okay.
yeah, that also might be us reading into it, but let's keep going. Maybe there's some more evidence
Okay. Panel by
for
panel
this
also
working
says,
theory we have.
yeah. On closer inspection, it feels like much of that roughness comes from how you use the hatching to create this sketchy feel to the art. Is that a balance you're considerate of between being rough and still defined and readable? And then Deladera says, I would really like to have a very detailed style because I know that sometimes my lines may seem too rough for someone's taste. But I've understood that this comes from a need that I have to meet, an urge for immediacy and emotional impact. And that's the thing that connects up with Tinian's
Mm.
drive when he says, I want a feeling. That's the most important part of this. And then Deladera is like, I want to have emotional impact. And also, so Tinian described the story changing and kind of taking off from his path
Yeah.
because of little elements that he saw and things that Deladera drew that then caught him, like the eyes of the main character or the way he drew these bandanas that have the image of teeth on them. So they're sort of like they distinguish the hunters. And Deladera says, I like to have a few elements that describe the character. He's talking about how he develops someone because the less elements I have to draw and the more I'm able to make the character act. What I love most is when, so there are some weird little, not quite grammatically correct things in this interview. I copied
Yeah.
and pasted it. So this is how it came.
Yep.
I like to have few elements that describe the character because the less elements I have to draw and the more I'm able to make the character act. What I love most is when you can feel the gesture in the line, the spontaneity of the drawing. That's why I try to avoid getting too heavy on the gear when imagining a character. That seems like an idiom that didn't quite make it. You have to understand and recognize the role they play, but without it getting in the way of the action and dynamism of the storytelling. One of the main things that I try to achieve is the uniqueness of the character, something that distinguishes it and makes it recognizable. I try to find that feature that can single handedly or almost single handedly describe a character, their personality, or at least make them memorable and distinct on the page and fun to draw, of course.
I think this really is what makes this guy's artwork for me. And you know, him saying so I can make the character act really made it all come together for me just now. That there is a lot more focus on the storytelling of what the character is doing rather than what they're saying, right?
Yeah.
One of the things that struck me about this book the first time I read it, I remember reading a few issues and thinking, does this woman only have one eye?
Yeah.
Because the what he just described, the sort of branding on this character is that her hair is always parted in such a way that it is covering one eye on her face, but her eyes are huge.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really distinct and noticeable. Like, why am I not seeing this other eye? And it's um it turns out she has two eyes. She's not hiding a dead socket.
But you felt
Contributed
that
to
when
the
you first saw it.
mystery of this
Yeah.
book. Yeah, the weirdness of it.
It's also very interesting the movement, the action that is revealed. Like we meet her kind of all bundled up because she's come
Yeah.
to Milwaukee. When she becomes our monster killer, our monster hunter, she throws her coat off and she's this, wiry, small, fast moving woman.
Hmm.
And just by drawing her without the coat on, it like adds to the motion, you know,
Oh yeah.
like
Yeah. Hmm.
these little tricks. Um, Deladera feels like a person who's really excited about the way to draw, the tricks in drawing comics, and having something interesting to chew on.
Hmm.
Like he even said, so panel by panel also then gets into a deep discussion about gutters, the space between panels.
Yeah.
And Deladere is like, "Oh yeah, I like that too." And then panel by panel says you switch them up for flashbacks with these really brushy, thick panel edges. Are there visual rules like this that you establish before you start drawing pages on a new series? And Deladere says, "Yes, I do things like that. For example, I've established to change the line art style on flashbacks too, apart from the obvious reasons, because it gives me a chance to change things from time to time for myself. This is a thing that I really need to do as an artist to change. But when I start a project, I know I'm not going to be able to change my style for the next 100 pages or so, because you obviously want to keep your style consistent through the project. So I use flashbacks to have some kind of style turnover and avoid getting bored of the kind of main style that I'm using."
Hmm. Okay. Um, if there was little on the illustrator, there was zero on the colorist. Miquel Muerto, who's a Spanish-based colorist. That was all I could find. And I think I found like his Instagram.
Yeah.
That was it.
Well,
But you,
luckily, he's in panel
yeah,
by panel too.
yeah, yeah,
So this the segue that panel by panel delivers to us is I'm always curious about artists' relationship with colors on their pages. And Deladera says, I have to admit that I never think about colors when I work on the pages. I've always thought that if the line art is good enough, if I've done my job properly, the colorist will find the right canvas to express themselves and will achieve the best outcome. And I have to confess here, Chris, it's always a little bit disorienting when I realize, oh, yeah, the colors on the page that I read,
yeah.
that's not what the artist has put there.
Right,
They've done a bunch of black and white stuff with shading and texture, but then someone's coming and putting color on top of that. That wasn't the end result of the artist. It's, continuing the collaboration.
right. Yeah.
So Deladera says, Miquel is a really good colorist. I love his palette. It's really unique. Sometimes for some specific sequences, Miquel and I'm saying Miquel because it's Miquel.
Yeah.
Miquel and I will have a chat about colors on some particular panel, but generally speaking, he knows what to do, and I let him do it. And so then panel by panel moves on to the colorist. Uh, what is it you look for in a story or line art to push you in the direction of textures and the appropriate textures? Did you go through many iterations before choosing this particular one? And Miquel Muerto says the first proposal was more or less the final one. Although in the beginning, I got a little crazy trying to work with a more pictorial attempt similar to what Jacob Phillips does on Criminal, but it didn't work. Without flats, I don't know what that means, Chris. Can you
I
explain
Yeah.
flats?
So flats are how you start off coloring a page, which is you don't worry about what the actual colors are just yet. You just fill in the spaces between the lines with solid color.
Okay.
And then once you've got the entire page filled in with solid color, then you can go through and you can select those colors and just fill them in with what the palette is that you want to use. And
Okay.
once you do that, you can start applying effects and filters and brushes and all that kind of stuff to give it texture.
Okay. So Muerto says, without flats, I was pretty lost whenever I needed to do adjustments, and all the dirty brushstrokes weren't anything more than an imposter. uh, Finding the right level of dirtiness was the key to work well with Werther's fine lines. Now, I love that
Mm.
sentence.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I gotta say the colors didn't like. stand out to me, and I think that's a good thing, right? Like he's not trying to steal the show. He's not trying to
Yeah,
he's
that's
contributing to the storytelling.
that's what I was trying to say earlier is that the colors feel like what they're supposed to be.
Hmm.
I look at a page here
Yeah,
and I don't think, oh yeah, the colorist came and put the color in there. I don't notice it as
right.
this kind of cool effect. It really does feel like, well, that's exactly what the intent was.
So then it looks like they ask him about the palette and how he considers his palette for a full 22 pages versus like not just the issue, but like the series.
And he says, my color for this series always starts from a naturalistic approach where I color grade as if I were working with a film. I think that's really neat.
Hmm.
Um, you know, every once in a while I hear someone describe the color grading process of a movie, and that just sounds like the most painstaking,
Mm.
long ass, boring day you could have in the editing bay. But in this case, he thinks of how is the whole series going to feel? How is each issue going to feel? How is each scene going to feel? So that if he does a washed in blue scene, how's that still going to match up with everything else? Like if it's a
Yeah.
bright green, uh, sunny day in a green meadow or something like that. And he talks about it very much like a movie. He grades it like he's doing a movie. He's thinking about where the light comes from. He's trying to identify a light source in the scene to figure out how to do the color.
That's the sign of a good colorist. I've done very limited coloring on books before. It's not my forte. I've done a lot of flatting and then
Yeah,
let other people finish the coloring. Um, but everything I've read on coloring and how to do it right is what he's talking about here.
I find it fun that he follows that kind of distinct, like I pay attention to this, and this, to then say, there's not a lot of logical thought process through my workflow. It's more intuitive than anything.
Hmm.
Always reading the script, focusing on understanding the path that the characters have from the first to the last page. But I work with each scene individually, focusing first in the scenery, later in the characters, and finally, if there is anything special that needs to pop up. While checking all the pages, it seems that there is somewhat a day to night progression through the whole arc, so it looks like everything was planned. But I don't usually have all the pages available when I start working, and planning long term is off the table. So with each new issue, there are more and more pages that help to build the next ones and give us the possibility to play with the reader's expectations with the clues that we established before.
Hmm. Okay. And then lettering was a little confusing to me until you dug this up. So the lettering that's cited in the book is by a company, and World Design. And I just went to their website because that was all I could find online about them. They're a studio that works with pretty much all the major comics publishers. Sounds like based on the site, there's about 5 people that work there. But you dug this up that apparently the founder and owner of the company is the one who actually did the coloring on this
Yeah.
book.
Darren Bennett, who has done a ton of, no relation, Darren Bennett, who's done a ton of lettering in big studios and independent work, he started And World Design.
Okay.
And panel by panel says, Darren, when it comes to designing lettering approaches, what factors do you work towards when getting to a style? And then Bennett, and this is back to the other stuff we were talking about, like where they're saying, I don't know what my genre is. Bennett says, I don't get hung up on genre so much. It's important for sure, but I think the art will dictate what I put on the page more than anything else. For instance, in this case, we're doing horror, right? I think Werther and McKell already bring all of the sensibilities of the genre into the page with their work. So my lettering becomes a product of that as I feed off of them.
Hmm.
It's wild how the way they talk about the process is very conveyor belt. Obviously, they are doing stuff that is
That's
artistic and
literally what it
has
is.
their
Like,
personality. But
yeah.
Tinian gave the script to Werther. He drew the lines. He gave that to McKell, who did the colors. He gives that to Darren, who then does the line work. The lettering, always trying to make it match what's already there, not make it
Yeah.
match some
Yeah.
idea of what do the letters look like in a comic where something is killing the children?
Hmm. I mean, it is that's how uh, the comics process has worked primarily in the Western world. Like, there are some books. The one that comes to mind is this book that I told you about recently, More Weight, A Salem
Yeah,
Story. That guy wrote, drew, colored, lettered everything himself, right? A book like this, yeah, it's like it's factory production.
yeah.
And it's that's how it's been since like the 30s, you know,
I'm
like
sure this doesn't
literally.
surprise people who know the process, but
Yeah.
maybe there's one person listening to this right now who never thought about it.
I
And
think
so
that's
we're
exactly it.
exploding this view a little bit.
Yeah, that's exactly it is. If a comic is done well, you don't think about it. It doesn't stand out to you.
Here's one thing that did stand out in Darren's description of how he figures out how to letter. I try to hear the dialogue as I drop it in. I'll modify the look of the balloon, the word balloon, as a response to what I think it sounds like.
Hmm.
And then he goes into the details. If it's supposed to be louder, it gets tapered edge. Double balloon in red usually indicates some sort of alarm. Like he's got all of these tricks.
Hmm.
But I can just imagine he's like reciting these lines, trying to perform them as he's writing out his letters.
Yeah, think about it like a script, right? So let's say you've got a line of dialogue, but you've only got so much space to fit it on the page. The art of lettering is figuring out where to break the line. One, so that it reads fluidly and it reads like you think that it would sound coming out of a person's mouth. But two, so that it fits. And three, so that it's in the shape of a balloon, right? So you want it to be the parts of the dialogue to be longer in the middle and shorter on the top and bottom.
Yeah. And not square.
Yeah. Yeah, or sometimes they are square, right? Like maybe you're doing a caption and it's a square box, but yeah, it's I've done quite a bit of lettering and it's a lot of work and very underappreciated and very underpaid.
Well, I'm glad we got to shout out all of these
Yeah.
creators. Let's talk about the studio.
Yeah. I know we're going long. These last couple episodes have really gone longer than we normally do. So we're going to talk about the studio, and then we're going to talk about how the studio is adapting this or trying to adapt it, and then I think we should take a break.
Sounds good to me.
Um, so let's talk about Boom Studios. They are a comic book publisher headquartered in Los Angeles, California. I don't know why I said it like that. California.
You're trying to get the accent in, but you
Yeah.
can't because you're
Yeah.
from the Northeast.
Yeah. It was started by Ross Ritchie, although I've seen it said that it's supposed to be pronounced Roz Ritchie, and Andrew Cosby, both of whom worked in Hollywood in the entertainment business prior to starting this company. They founded it in 2005, and the quote from them is that they have been helping to option comic book projects as producers and working to develop them into films and with studios, and they became increasingly frustrated with what they felt was, quote, a focus on tights and capes of most mainstream comic book companies. So I think they wanted more independent, different genres.
Yeah. And I didn't realize this about Boom Studios that like the drive is the adaptation. The drive is get some comics that can then become more than just the issues.
I think you are right, but I don't think they would agree with you.
And that's
Every
fine.
comic book publisher that has had that said about them always says, "No, we're all about the comics first." But when you look at the moves that this company has made and you look at the background of the people who work there, yeah, I think you're probably right, Charlie. So they started in 2005, but they moved into licensing in 2006. That's pretty fast.
Yeah.
And then they acquired another comic book company in 2013, Archaea Studios, which is a great publisher. They put out some amazing books, both before and after Boom acquired them. Um, and then they signed a first look deal with 20th Century Fox in 2013. Then in 2017, 20th Century Fox purchased a minority stake in Boom, which was valued at $10 million. That's a
And Disney ended up
minor.
buying that when they bought Fox. So
Yeah.
I don't think there's any argument against this particular comic book publisher being more wired into the film and television industry than other publishers.
I agree. I'm just telling it like I think they would say it. Um, but this is so okay. First look deal with 20th Century Fox that gets consumed by Disney, and then presumably the first look deal expired because then they signed a first look deal with Netflix in 2020, and that's important to this book. But
Wait,
I
what is
want to
your understanding of what a first look deal is?
it is that if you are going to pitch a project as a film, that they get the first right of refusal.
Yeah,
They look at the project and they can put a bid on it, um, and or they can refuse it, and then you can move on to pitching
yeah.
it to other
They get
companies.
to look at everything first before you
Hmm.
try and sell it to someone else.
Yes. Um, I think to your point, I want to read a paragraph from Hollywood Reporter on how they describe Boom Studios. Boom Studios made a mark with original titles like Keanu Reeves' Berserker, Something is Killing the Children, and Lumberjanes. It has also found success publishing licensed comics such as Power Rangers, Dune, Garfield, and Dark Crystal. It will maintain its Los Angeles offices. This is after it was bought by Penguin Random House, which we'll get to in a second. It will maintain its Los Angeles offices and continue to publish through four distinct lines. Okay. Tinian says he tells this story about Boom helping him, originally do his creator own work, and then he says, once I realized that Boom was a home that was going to give me the opportunity to do it, I went all in. I think my big advice would be you need to find the partners who are going to let you tell your best work, and you need to listen to what you feel is your best work. I don't understand what that last part of that sentence means. Um, the
I
listening to what you feel is your
yeah.
best
So
work.
this is what I read there. Um, you need to find the partners who want what you do best, but also you have to recognize what you do best and trust that.
Yeah. Um, I am going to say this. Not this is not my perspective. This is something I've heard other people in comics say about Tinian and other writers with similar careers. People complain about his books and they say that they feel like they are pitches for TV series. I wouldn't agree with that. This does not feel like the pitch to a TV series to me because most TV series aren't going to want to cut children in half. But um, you can sort of read between the lines in some of the things he says here, and when he talks about the adaptation of this comic book series, that that may not necessarily be true, but he does want to work in that entertainment world. And I think this line here where he says, you need to find the partners who are going to let you tell your best work. Yeah, like these people let him tell the story he wanted to tell, as we've heard, right? Like he went from 5 issues to 15 issues to 100 issues as a series. But they're also facilitating this being positioned into a different medium that he can then work in.
Yeah. I think that the thing to remember with that whole this comic reads like a proposal for a pitch for a television show.
Yeah.
Um, I think it's inescapable for comic book writers to be influenced by television and television writers to be influenced by film and film directors to be influenced by comic books
Yeah.
and novels and all of the other relationships like the remediation or the
Hmm.
remix culture that exists now because so much is always available.
Yeah. Yeah.
The methods and the techniques and the feeling of other media influence all the other media.
And something I've heard from, I've either read in interviews with some of the greatest comic book creators of all time, or I've heard from my friends who are successful comic book creators is, um, don't mistake the two mediums for one another. Don't
Yeah.
write a comic book the way you would write a movie or a TV show. And so I think when some people complain about that as like, which I'm not sure what the complaint is actually, like, well, this person is just looking for success. um, but uh, sometimes it is they're writing for a different medium,
Yeah.
but it's in this medium because it's easier, right? It's easier to get a comic book published than it is to get a TV show made or a movie. Although at this point, with how much Netflix is churning out, maybe that's not true anymore. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah.
So last thing about Boom, they were bought by Penguin Random House in 2024. So they're part of one of the big five book publishers now. As part of this, Disney actually sold that minority stake in Boom. So Disney no longer owns that part of Boom either. Penguin Random House owns it outright.
And so that brings us to the not yet realized Netflix adaptation of Something is Killing the Children.
Mm.
It's funny, there's been an IMDb entry for a while now for this. And
Well,
then,
we're going to talk about why.
yeah, and then it doubled. So uh, let's describe this history quickly, even though there's much going on behind these words. There's a lot of
Yeah.
in between the lines.
Yep.
Boom announced a Netflix adaptation as part of the first look deal they have with the company. So Netflix looked at Something is Killing the Children and said, yeah, let's do it. In 2021, Trevor Macy and Mike Flanagan of Stephen King adaptation fame, were announced as co writers and executive producers, but stepped back because Netflix desired to take the project in a different direction.
I'm gonna pause you right there, and I'm not correcting you, but I would just say Mike Flanagan is probably known for more than Stephen King adaptations because he has had a deal with Netflix where he's produced his own original TV series there for, gosh, I don't know, seven. He's not there anymore, but he's done at least like four or five of those series there. So
Am I wrong though that he
he
was
has
raised
also
to
done
fame?
Stephen. I think they're concurrent with one another.
Okay.
But you're right. He's done like three or four Stephen King adaptations. The most recent one of this recording is that Life of Chuck movie. Have you
Yeah.
seen that?
I think he's the new Frank Darabont.
That's really insulting.
Why? Why is that insulting?
I think there's a lot more to Mike Flanagan because Frank Darabont's a director. Mike Flanagan like writes all of his own stuff. He's very deeply involved in the productions. I'm a big Mike Flanagan
Yeah.
fan,
Well,
but
I'm
also
glad now that you've stepped into the Darabont Flanagan knife
yeah.
fight, and
No, I don't think
I hope they eviscerate you.
I'm sure both of them will listen and they'll correct me. Yeah. Uh, but I just want to say Mike Flanagan does more than make Stephen King adaptations, which is
Okay.
probably why they wanted him to do something with this.
Although the connection, of course, is that if Tinya is
Yeah,
saying that it is the prime mover for his Stephen King influence.
for sure. Yeah. Yeah. And I believe as we're recording this, Mike Flanagan's next project is a TV adaptation of Carrie for Amazon.
You're not convincing me that he's not
He's
rising to fame
definitely
because
he's
of Stephen King
definitely Stephen King's best
adaptation.
friend. Don't get me wrong. My okay, let me put it this way. My favorite work of Mike Flanagan's isn't his Stephen King adaptations. I think his original stuff is amazing.
Is this the island and the priest?
Yeah, Midnight Mass is one
That's
of
the one.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great one, but he's done the House they did a bunch of houses. He did Fall of the House of Usher. He did Haunting of Hill House. All of those. Haunting of Bly House.
Oh my
There's a
God, this is a
fourth
real. I thought
one.
you were joking.
No,
This
he's done a ton of stuff. Yeah. What is it? Midnight. I can't remember the name of the series that he did. It's another adaptation. It's like the Midnight Club or Midnight
Huh.
society or something. It's an interesting story. The premise of that show that I can't remember the title of
Based
is
on the Twitter feed.
there's a bunch of kids who all have terminally ill diseases, and they each tell one another horrific stories every night at midnight.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and stop the Mike Flanagan super context, and we'll go back to the
Yeah.
something is killing the children.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm going to start again in the history of the Netflix adaptation. In 2021, Trevor Macy and Mike Flanagan, an accomplished director who is not limited to Stephen King,
Thank you.
uh, they were announced as co-writers and executive producers. But then they stepped back because Netflix, quote, desired to take the project in a different direction. In 2023, Netflix brought on the creators of Dark and 1899.
Have you
Uh,
seen either of those?
I just have seen the promos for Dark, which does seem like, oh, yeah, that totally matches
It does.
the
Yeah.
feeling of something's killing the children. There's
Yeah.
disappeared children in dark caves and things like that.
Yep. Yeah.
And then in 2024, that version of the Netflix show moved into pre-production. But then in 2025, Netflix released their option and Blumhouse acquired the rights.
So
And
let's pause for a second here. So one company acquires it. They put a star creative team on it. They back off. They put another star creative team on it. It goes into pre-production, although it sounds like it doesn't. And then Netflix sells it or drops it. And then another company buys it. And now they're going to put a star creative team on it.
yeah, but what they're going to do is adapt the series into both a live action feature film and an adult animated television series, with Tinian spearheading the animated series. And so I kind of wonder where this push started. You know, was Netflix looking to do multiple things and that's why these other creators backed off, or was it
Mm.
once people said, well, we just can't handle we can't get everything together in a series, or we can't get everything together into a feature film. If Blumhouse said, okay, well, we're going to do both then.
Yeah.
Um, there's also a Hollywood Reporter said that Lionsgate, the film company, circled the rights, quote unquote, while Netflix also chased after Netflix abandoned the option. But then they're like, oh, if you're going to make a movie, we're going after it.
Hmm.
This time, Netflix Movie Group wanted to take charge, but Blumhouse was more aggressive, loving the idea of a world where children can see monsters, but adults cannot. Part of what spurred intense interest, according to sources, was the success of Weapons,
So
Zach
that
Cregger's
means
summer horror hit.
this. So, okay. This doesn't make any sense to me because Weapons came out as we're recording this 4 or 5 months ago. They're saying that this happened in 2024, right? And then in 2025,
Well, no,
Blumhouse
no.
acquired it.
Netflix like ended their option, say, in
Oh,
2024.
okay.
In
Okay.
2025, Blumhouse got the rights, but then Netflix, once
Got
Blumhouse
it.
said we're going to make a movie and make an animated television series,
Yeah.
company's got to make those, right?
Do you
So
know what's kind of so there's two things that I'm taking away from this. The first is I think it's kind of funny because earlier when we were talking about how you were getting a little bit more amenable to violence against children's stories, I was going to recommend Weapons to you, which I don't know how much you know about, but
I know more
um
than I wish I did.
okay.
But what happened with Weapons was that it was shot at my kid's elementary school.
Oh, is that right?
That's yeah,
Oh,
that's
okay.
that's the home school for my neighborhood.
Funny. Okay. And then the other thing is this like, we're gonna do a movie and an animated series. Like everything is multi-projects, IPs. You can't just make a movie or make a TV show, right? Like it's all building a universe now, right? Like I think about this is relatively recent, right? Like those Dune movies came
Yeah,
out. They've done well. They're really well made. And then they were like, "Oh, we got to make a Dune universe of stuff." So we've got this Dune TV show now, you
yeah,
know?
and Dune comic books by
Right.
Boom.
Yeah, exactly, right? So that's what they're trying to do with this as well. And I mean, to be fair, which weirdly we haven't touched on this yet, there's spin-offs of this comic, like at least two, right?
Well, okay, yeah. And the reason we haven't touched that yet is because that didn't happen in the first arc. But, by the
Yeah.
time it got maybe 30 issues in, the world building of it
Yeah.
allowed for an expansion into the House of Slaughter series, which is the sort of bigger world. And that's perfect for franchise. That's, these something is
Exactly.
killing the children's cinematic universe.
So I picture what Bloomhouse is talking about is first movie is the first 15 issues of this comic book series. Animated series is probably House of Slaughter, or it is some flashbacks about Erica Slaughter's
Yeah.
life beforehand. Yeah.
And Tinian seems to be, if not driving these changes, he's certainly up for it because he says, I do have aspirations in other media. I never want to leave comics, but I want to understand the filmmaking process a lot better. I want to see what I can take from what I've learned making comics and bring it into that space. The thing that I'm learning over and over and over is that I really do value a certain degree of independence and autonomy. And that becomes harder and harder when the budgets for these projects move up and up and up. But if I can find myself a space in the independent film world, that would be incredibly exciting to me. So that's part of what I'm exploring with Tiny Onion right now. And Tiny Onion is his production company.
Right. And that is a perfect segue into this quote that was in the press release for Blumhouse acquiring the rights to this, which I know I topped this by sending like this episode by saying like I'm envious of James Tynion. But this quote is like the most PR speak I have ever read come out of a creator's mouth. Finding a partner who understood the potential of Erica Slaughter and the world Werther Deledria and I have built was crucial. And we have found that partner in Jason Blum. Nobody understands horror better than Blumhouse, and I can't wait for the world to see what we have all planned together.
Oh,
Yay!
Chris, you're just burning up, aren't you?
It's I don't know. You know what I am thinking about is the Philip K. Dick episode we did 2 months ago, where he was just like, "Fuck you! I'm not writing the adaptation of the movie that you're making on my book. I'm gonna write this weird thing about my friend instead." Like boy,
it's
times have changed.
it's two different strategies
Could
for
you
sure.
imagine Philip K. Dick being like, "Oh my God, I'm so thankful that I found a partner to make Blade Runner. Nobody understands Blade Runner better than Ridley Scott. I can't wait to see the world that he has planned."
Okay,
That kind of thing.
we need to take a break so you can cool off.
Okay. Charlie, something that has occurred to me over the course of this episode is maybe the reason why I haven't found financial success as a comic book creator or as a podcaster is because of my trauma and how I respond to the world. And I call bullshit out on people who would cut paychecks, uh, the
Yeah,
paychecks that you could use.
I think that's actually even more true than the joke you're sort of making. There is an amount of compromise required to, forgive me, monetize your quirks of personality. And you're not interested in doing that.
It appears I am not, which is why we do this mid-roll ad where we remind everybody who's listening to the show that we have a Patreon. And through that Patreon, for just $1 a month, you can support the show and get access to all kinds of goodies. What are those goodies, Charlie?
So we have a history of blooper reels, minisodes, and a special shadow podcast called Super King Context. None of that has started back up again in this Super Context 2025 edition, but they might.
You keep doing that during these mid rolls,
Yeah.
and you and I will have a conversation about it someday. But I will say this. I think I'm only willing to like do an episode about a Stephen King adaptation if it's just part of our regular monthly schedule rotation that we have right now. This is like the perfect sweet spot for me anymore, and I feel like I would be compromising other things.
Okay. So once again, you just won't play the game to make any money.
I guess so. Yeah, I guess I'm guarding my time, my boundaries, and my emotional availability.
All right. That's legit. But patreon.com/supercontext still has a bunch of stuff there and support the show. We'll keep doing it. Tell your friends about your favorite episode so far. Send someone you know one episode that you really liked. Let's expand the audience a bit.
And what's the URL again, Charlie?
Patreon.com/supercontext.
We're sure about that.
You motherfucker. And we're back. Okay. So, Something is Killing the Children is a now fairly long running creator owned comic done by an involved and independent and personal creator, but also with kind of like standard comic book publisher processes. He
Hmm.
writes it, an artist draws it, colorist does it, then it gets lettered, put out by a comic book publisher that supports its creators and creator owned work, but also puts out franchise comics for IP that's been around forever and is pushing to turn it into a movie and a television series and all this other stuff, despite it being a comic book about children being killed viciously and
Mm.
horrifically by monsters.
I have to imagine that whatever adaptation there is, it can't be explicit the way this is explicit.
The boys on Amazon, the
Yeah.
way that they are the grossest is a lot of reaction shots and blood splatter hitting the people
Yep.
watching it happen.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
not the only thing they do, but I imagine there's a lot of avoiding the grossest stuff by showing the aftermath and the effect on viewers, which actually matches kind of this comic book too, because so much of it is about stuff being witnessed and what happens to the people who witness it.
That's true. That's true. But there are scenes where it's like, oh my gosh, like you
Yeah.
just cut a 4-year old in half. Yeah.
Yes, that's true.
Did you have anything else to add to your summary?
I just, it seems like this guy lives a charmed life.
I, thank you. I'm glad you said it, not me. I think that is the case too. But I also, like I said, I think he's very talented. I also think he recognizes that he's very fortunate and seems to be like trying to give back in some ways as well.
There are some creators that we read their quotes and they do sound a little bit like, get a load of me.
Yeah.
And he
Yeah.
does not come across that way at all.
So speaking of the numbers that we're about to give you, the quotes come from Boom Studios, not from James Tinian. And I say that because there is a lot of hype talk in the numbers and the way that the numbers are framed. And I suspect that's because, as we've mentioned, like they're actively courting movie studios. They clearly have a PR department. The company's sales and marketing president is the one who says a lot of these things. So I want to think through what we're being told here and the way it's being said. The first is that even before the release of the first issue, the comic book went to second and third printings.
So this matches up with the advanced sales comment when Tinian was talking about how he was able to change the plan because his editor said, well, there's already been so much advanced sales. It looks like we can justify going to a longer run than just 5 issues.
So I believe what they mean is comic books are solicited 3 months before they come out to retailers. So issue one would have been solicited 3 months before it hit the shelves. And it sounds like there were enough advanced orders of issue one that they could justify more than 5 issues. And subsequently did a second and third printing. And even when the first issue actually hit the stands, they went to a fourth printing. What matters here is how many copies they printed per printing.
Right.
And that is what is not said. So let's talk about this for a second. Sometimes in comics, a publisher will purposefully print a low quantity of a first issue, especially one that they know has heat behind it, to generate more buzz.
Just so you
To
can say,
Yeah,
hey, we went into a second printing.
this thing sold out. We're
We're
going to more
adding a
printings.
variant cover.
Oh, this book is filthy with variant covers. There's like 5 variant covers per issue. Yeah, you get them all in the back of each of the
Yep.
volumes. They're cool. I'm not denying that. But yes, there's a lot of sales strategery going on here.
Yeah. I get a good vibe from James Tinian. I want to lead with that. I feel like he is a artist who is working in a marketable medium.
Yeah,
But every once in a while it does feel like, oh my God, is there $50 pre-sale double cover packages with a beanie and
right.
your own bandana? Do I need this? Does this need to
Yeah.
exist?
And a drop of James Tinian's blood. Yeah.
But you know what? If it's selling and
Well,
that's what
that's the
people
thing.
want,
They know how
okay,
to make
cool.
money off their books. Great, right? And we just said, like, how did he get the money to put razor blades out? Maybe this is how, with all those variant covers. The other thing that the sales and marketing president of Boom announced was that it was the top-selling original series launch in their history. Um, and so this is an example of what I mean about Tinian giving back. He's interviewed in 2024 about the series, so it's been going for about 5 years. And he says, I hope the success of this series will help move the comics industry back towards more long form creator owned series because he believes that long form serial is the greatest strength of the American direct market. So, he's what he's commenting on, I think, is like Vertigo used to do like almost 100 issue runs
Yeah.
of long form independent books. The books that we're talking about right now, The Boys, which wasn't a Vertigo book, Preacher, Sandman, The Invisibles, all of
Mm-hmm.
this stuff, right? Like long storytelling. And that has moved away as like the industry's contracted. They're more conservative about sales and hedging their bets on whether a book is going to do big or not before they commit to more issues. So I think it's admirable that he's got that goal in mind.
This is so funny. It's like a negative image of the TV thing. I've heard folks talk about how not having to fill 24 episodes for a season, not
Mm-hmm.
having to go for 100 episodes to get syndication
Yeah.
means you can do quality television. But then there's been this backlash, and this is all anecdotal, but there's been a backlash of like, it takes so the same amount of time to do fewer episodes. They cost so much. There's not a lot of TV. And so people are now using the blank space to just dump crap like Netflix's,
Mm.
you know, 30 new movies in 30 days or whatever.
Yeah.
Like TV stripped down its production model to like 8 and 12 episode seasons to do better TV, except
hmm
now people are like, oh, this is not working for us.
I think it depends on the storytelling, though, right? Like, there's a difference, and this gets brought up later. There's a difference between compression and decompression in storytelling, right? And like, people say that something is killing the children is decompressed, in that, like, the idea of that is that he's drawing out what would, he literally says this,
Yeah.
he's drawing out what would have been one issue into 5 issues, right?
And in fact, the more recent issues often feel like two plot points and an awful lot of atmosphere.
Sure. Whereas, a TV show like Prestige TV is doing a lot more with less space.
Yeah, except also Pluribus just came out, and
That was the show I was thinking of.
I
Yeah.
saw one person post. Now we have to wait another 2 years for 8 more episodes.
Yeah. 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 True. We should also take into account in terms of sales that this did so well that there's multiple spin-off titles. We mentioned House of Slaughter already. Also I have not read these. There's also Books of Slaughter.
So these are like longer, almost graphic novel size single prints, almost like
Okay.
compendiums of lore and stories.
Ah, okay. And they're co-written with somebody named Tate Bromble rather than Tinian doing all of it on his own. And then this sounds interesting. There's a Swamp Thing crossover coming in 2026, which apparently the title of is Swamp Thing is Killing the Children.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
What? I don't, oh, I don't even want to, I don't like that at all. That bothers
I
me.
do. It sounds great.
All
I'm on board.
right, let's get back to the numbers. Bleeding Cool, citing a boom statement, says the first 20 issues of the book sold 2 million copies in 2 years.
What a weird way to parse numbers.
Well,
And I look, I'm sorry. Maybe this is why James Tinian is very successful and I'm not, because I'm like often calling out what seems like bullshit to me. Um,
it's not
and
bullshit, Chris.
when I
It's
worked for a
just picking
digital
the
media
right number to
company,
make it
I
sound good.
exactly. When I worked for a digital media company, I heard shit like this every day, like different ways of packaging numbers so it sounds even better, right? Okay, 20 issues, 2 million copies, 2 years. Okay, let's unpack this for a second. It I think what this means, if we divide 2 million by 20, is that on average each issue sold 100,000 copies, which is still like that's high for a creator-owned comic.
Yeah, but it's
But it's
important to
not
recognize that
2 million.
it wasn't the first 10 issues sold a million copies. It's the
The
first
way that's phrased
20
makes it
sold
sound
2
like
million.
2 million people are reading this book. I don't think that's true.
Yeah, that's not true.
um, and 100,000 is still high, but it is not as high as they're making it sound. I think also too, like we can probably guess that the first issues sold more than 100,000 because usually a book starts off high and then there's like periodic attrition as
Yeah,
it goes on.
advanced sales do mean that someone's like, "Ooh, I can't wait to see this." And nothing is universally loved.
Yeah. So okay, so here's Rich Johnston at Bleeding Stool. He said Bleeding Stool.
Ooh,
Bleeding cool.
oh dear.
Wow, that was the best Freudian slip I've ever made. As I understand it, that 2 million copy mark was before something is killing the children number 21. Orders came in at over 150,000 copies, which I believe that's the beginning of a new arc, right? So that's probably why there's a little bit of a spike. For those keeping track at home, that means that orders for the return of Erica Slaughter doubled from initial to final orders. Okay, so what he's saying is um, the book was before that it was selling half of 150,000, and then she came back in issue 21 and it jumped again.
Oh, I see. So yeah, so the 5 issues between 15 and 21. Wait,
Yeah,
16,
he's
17, 18,
saying
19,
he's
20.
saying
Yeah.
that issue 20 it was selling 75,000 copies and then it jumped to 150,000 copies. Um then he says this, Something is Killing the Children isn't the only Boom series to join the Millionaire Club in 2021. Again, not a million copies. Um Keanu Reeves, Matt Kent, and Ron Garney's Berserker also sold more than 1 million copies in 2021. He says that's rather impressive for a comic that just released its seventh issue in comic shops this week. Okay, but did it sell a million copies between 7 issues, or did the first issue sell a million copies?
Yeah, and I can't bring myself to read that comic because of how much I want to read it because it's a Keanu Reeves comic. Like I'm triggered in a good way by it being a Keanu Reeves comic.
There's a lot about Berserker and I don't know how much you're familiar with it, but there's like multimedia stuff around it already. It's
Yeah,
clearly
yeah,
designed to
yeah,
be like a pitch for a movie, but there's a book. Do you know that there's a book and China Mieville wrote the book?
yeah. We talked about this, and you were
Yeah.
angry then too.
I was, yeah. I don't know that I'm angry about about this comic
Sorry,
series,
a
but
little hot about
I
it.
have no I have no interest in reading this, right? Like something that's written by an actor to be made into a movie. I don't know. It doesn't sound interesting to me. The main character is drawn to look exactly like him. That's
Mhm.
there's a specific this is a weird segue and I'll move off of it quickly. There's a specific kind of comic that is written by an actor to be created into another media where the main character is drawn to look exactly like the actor that I am fascinated by because this has happened many times over the years. And there's like history of comics is littered with series that never got made into movies where, oh, Sam Jackson's the protagonist of this. Oh, it's Rosario Dawson. Like there's all of
Right.
these like actor driven. I think there's an Avril Lavigne one maybe, and there's just kind of this like fascinating trail of wreckage behind
It means you
it.
can make a little money off your pitch deck instead of just building it and
Yeah,
then getting it rejected.
exactly. Yeah. I find it compelling. Like it's an interesting format.
Okay. So by mid 2024, Boom Studios reported that all something related titles, that is to say, all the Something is Killing the Children titles, all of the House of Slaughter, which I think it tapped out at 30 issues, something like that. And then the Books of Slaughter, those had all sold over 4.5 million copies worldwide.
This is a Hollywood. This is again like Boom's press release regurgitated by Hollywood Reporter about the acquisition by Blumhouse. They say after bowing in September of 2019. I think that doesn't seem like the right verb. Bowing.
It says bowing and then hacked its way. So I don't know.
Okay.
Maybe there's some context there, like, bowing to your competitors first or something.
Hmm. After bowing in September of 2019, Children hacked its way to becoming the biggest horror comic since The Walking Dead and the biggest indie since Saga. The first issue has sold over 175,000 copies over the course of multiple printings, while the comic has sold over 5 million since launch, a rare feat in modern publishing, not just in indie comics, but even for Marvel and DC books.
Okay.
Okay, so again, let's unpack that.
The over
I
5 million, if we
Yeah,
go by Boom saying that it was 4.5 million for all related titles,
right.
that 5 million is not Something is Killing the Children. That is
No.
Something is Killing the Children, House of Slaughter, Books of Slaughter, and whatever else
And
is
spread out
added
over
in.
multiple issues. And what we're being told here as well is that the first issue, multiple printings, has sold 175,000 copies. So I think we can safely say that the audience for this book is roughly 175,000 people, not 5 million people.
Okay. It does sound like you're trying to pop some kind of bubble, but it's a well reviewed and a critically acclaimed series.
Yeah, I want to be clear. I'm not trying to take away from this book. This book is great. It is selling well. It's well written. It deserves the awards it got. What I'm saying is the sales mechanisms of the publishing industry are inflating these numbers in a way that are not realistic.
Yeah. It is an Eisner Award winning series. Let's see. It's won 4 Eisner Awards and 2 Ringo Awards for things like New Series, Book of the Year, Best Writer, Best Continuing Series, Superior Achievement in a Graphic Novel, although that was just a nomination, and Best Single Issue.
He has won Best Writer 3 times for the Eisners for this series, and was nominated a fourth time. That's wild. That's high critical acclaim.
Well,
And remember,
com-
the Eisners are coming from your peers.
yeah. Comic Book Review says these comics create a dark, foreboding atmosphere with their art that perfectly complements the storytelling. Something is Killing the Children also excels in providing the reader with plenty of mysteries while also providing enough information to keep the audience engaged with the story. By placing innocent children in danger, creating terrifying and powerful foes, and providing a mysterious and morally questionable hero to save the town, Something is Killing the Children is a compelling read for any fan of horror comics. Despite
So
it being a very personal, feeling based comic by this creator, it also is kind of perfect in genre terms.
yeah, I think so. And I think it where it succeeds, and we talked about this with the focus on characterization, it succeeds in being um something that the readers can find points of identification in.
Yeah.
It's universal in a way. I mean, universal in the sense of the characters, not in the sense of not everybody's going to want to read a story
No,
about
no.
child murder. But if you're a horror fan,
Yeah. And
this
there's
has got the juice.
lots of ins in the story for you to relate to a non protagonist, non villain, to relate to a
Mhm.
witness or victim.
So there were a few things that I noticed over the course of, reading 20 articles about this book. The first was we've already mentioned there was very little focus on the art until we found that panel by panel interview. The second is that there was very little criticism of it. Everything was glowing. And I was like, surely this can't be the case because I know Charlie Bennett and Charlie Bennett can find
Yeah.
a bad review of anything.
So let's say that again. You were saying weren't a lot of bad reviews by codified
Not even
critics.
not even bad reviews, just anything that wasn't like this is the best thing that ever happened. There was no critical analysis. Let me put it that way. And
Just wait until it gets on TV.
yeah, yeah. I've seen that happen before
Yeah.
with comic series that get adapted to
I mean, I
TV.
can
Yeah.
write the headlines right now.
Mhm.
Something is Killing the Children is actually bad for real.
Well, you usually turn to Goodreads to try to find bad reviews
I
for
do.
things. I turn to Reddit.
I think that's
Um,
appropriate for this one too.
and here's what Reddit tours had to say about this. They said that it was slowly paced, decompressed, and that it was written for the trade. Not so written for the trade rather than being written for TV.
Yeah.
Um,
Written for TV.
yeah.
Oh, you're saying the attack is as opposed to being written for TV.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Um, they say that the protagonist makes dumb decisions based on her background,
Okay.
which I don't know if I agree with or not. I
Well, a lot of these come from the post issue 15 stuff.
True. And also I think we could take into stock too that Redditors are not necessarily experts in storytelling. Um, they say that there's a lot of cliche tropes. I think that is something that's a fair assessment. Like, I don't know necessarily that this is like breaking ground in plot, but we've already mentioned like that's not the focus.
Yeah.
The focus is on the like characters and the traumatic effects of the plot on those characters. And then there's apparently a polarized response to the art that they don't like his art.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
if you are used to how like the current Amazing Spider-Man run looks,
yeah,
this is
yeah,
going to look
it is.
amateurish or
Mhm.
incomprehensible.
Yeah, it's not on brand for the big two, that's for sure. Um, okay. There were positive reviews as well, and I wanted to read these. So one person said it has the right ratio of gore, mystique, and coolness. Those are interesting qualities to look for in your fiction. Gore and coolness. I would agree Mystique is on the board. This guy wrote a really long positive review. Tiny Onion is killing it across the board, and he is establishing himself as one of the greats of this decade. Uh, this series is his series. It is not a run, it's not a spin-off, it's all him. An original IP that plays into his favorite motif of, quote, belief alters reality is one that is constantly being fought in US politics, in laws being passed, and ultimately how readers live their lives.
Okay, let's Let's be very particular about that.
Yeah.
So the key to something is killing the children is that kids, when they imagine monsters, they manifest them.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
only the kids can see the monsters unless some really bad stuff has happened to you.
Right.
So
Yeah.
there is a kind of your fears or obsessions are warping reality, which is that belief alters reality motif, which also shows up in Department of Truth, which is another Tinian creator owned comics series by Image,
Hmm.
um, in which conspiracy theories all come true the more that people believe in them.
Yeah. Yeah. This Redditor continues, hey, that anxiety that is running your life, it has manifested and wants to eat you. This book captures such a perfect moment of public consciousness and hits right before the pandemic and all the crazies came out and somewhat tainted the novelty of Department of Truth. It's a slow burn series, but has some seriously standout characters in the world. Okay, I'm going to stop there. My takeaway from this isn't a particularly well written hot take on this book, but I think I'm saying he, I don't know, maybe, I don't know their gender. But this person is touching upon some things that nobody else has talked about so far with this series in our work, right? Like this motif of belief altering reality, or how this lines up with current events, both political and health related.
Yeah. And it's interesting to say that essentially the fandom that arose after the pandemic kind of accelerated conspiracist thinking
Hmm.
ruined this person's enjoyment of a series about conspiracy thinking.
Yeah. Yeah, it was too real. It's interesting. I'm in a book club and I just started reading Leah Satili's Blazing Eye Sees All, which is about the rise of conspiracy theories and like alternative spirituality and post-facts reality. And
Uh-huh.
it's all kind of lining up with this. Yeah. One more thing I want to add about why I think this book is popular. I would say never underestimate the popularity of a book that has a protagonist that is easy to cosplay as.
Yeah.
It is so easy for somebody to be Erica Slaughter or really anybody from House of Slaughter, right? Like that I think that is also really compelling too. It maybe it might not even contribute to sales, right? Like some folks cosplay and don't even read the books that they're cosplaying as, but it's easy to brand. Let's put it
Yeah.
that way.
And the most clear cosplaying that you can do with this is to wear the bandana that identifies the hunters, and then everything else is just kind of
Comb
make
your
it
hair
sort of
over one
look
of
the
your
same.
eyes,
Yeah.
yeah, and draw a scar on your head.
Now, who
Uh,
is Steve at Wayward Studio?
I don't know, but this was the only like I wouldn't call this official. This was like a guy's blog, I think, but this was the only like written up critical review I found of the series.
All right, we'll see if you can pop this bubble then.
So Steve says that he's talking about the first volume that it feels at one and the same time cliched in its scenes and characters and working too hard to provoke the readers through the gore of child's bodies. He also says the first volume leaves far too much yet unexplained, though the foreshadowing of a dark cabal of monster killers isn't altogether promising. Quote, am I missing something? Or is some horror now more akin to dark fantasy? I felt no horror, but was compelled a bit by the action. This, I don't know, is like a legit criticism. Like, I want things to be revealed more quickly.
I think this is good in the sense that here are why some people would not like it. These
Yeah.
all make sense in terms of someone's opinion. This
Hmm.
is a dark gore fest with an insidious cabal of PR masters behind it. We learn more about each. The tension and action, if not the terror, is ramped up, but nothing is really resolved. Tinian is not afraid to shock us by losing important or seemingly innocent characters, but again, this feels more like a need to shock than an essential plot point. This is a kind of bad review now, right? Where someone says the rationale behind this piece of the story does not match my moral requirements.
Yes, exactly. This is sort of along the lines of what I was saying of like, I think in the 30 to 40 years since It and Pet Cemetery, that we've come a long way from how people would react to um, this level of gore, especially gore directed at children.
Yeah.
And this is more what I was thinking of, like, not just like the sort of PMRC critique of like, oh my God, how could you possibly, put that out in the world? But this is more like, why are you doing this
Yeah.
without giving me something to justify it?
Essentially, Steve is saying this feels exploitative,
I think so. Yeah. Yeah.
but it does have in this, even in this bad review, it does have kind of a little bit of what the magic is for this series. The human story resolution of this series of issues was original and provocative, making it the highlight of the 3 volumes so far. I totally bought it, as desperate and classically awful as it was. The, the thing that people who really enjoy this and try and figure out how to enjoy it talk about is that it is driven by the gore fest or driven by the horror side of it, the
Hmm.
victims and monsters. But the really good stuff is people dealing with what they think of as their blame for these things, what they think of as their responsibility to victims and to trying to solve the problem of the monsters, and the way that folks try to feel okay or try to continue in the midst of grief and trauma.
Yeah. Um, I think you are selling me more on the book. Like I will say this, like, um, we started off the episode and I said I like this, but I don't love it.
Yeah.
But the deeper that we get into this, um I find more to like about the book, and I understand more why other people love it so much.
Reading over this stuff and then going back and speed reading the first 15 issues, I was delighted by the mechanics of the story, because I'm reading it with Tinian's voice in my head, oh, I had to expand it. I put myself in the main character. I called him James, I wanted
Yeah.
Erica to only drop in, but then she was too cool and I wanted to stay with her. Like I'm kind of hearing that, but also I'm seeing like, oh yeah, these are escalating story beats. This
Yeah.
is a moment that's unexpected in a horror story because we're talking to someone for a good 2 pages about how they felt about being trapped, that kind of thing. And I found it very compelling. I found it re-compelling because by this point in the run of Something is Killing the Children, there are a few issues that do feel like what happened in
When
this
you say by this
issue.
point, you mean where it's at as we are recording this presently, which is
Yeah,
like
I
issue
think
40
issue
something.
44 or 45. And there are a couple that are like, did this issue just get them to a house? I think this issue just
Okay.
got them from the town to a house.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Here's another thing that like didn't seem to get brought up at all, and I don't know if that's a good thing or if it's like another like lack of analysis, but we've already mentioned like Tinian is queer, and he makes a point to often include queer protagonists or supporting characters. And this book is no different. In the first arc, both the character James, who is James Tinian
Yeah.
clearly, uh, and one of his murdered friends, they both identify as queer. Um, and Multiversity Comics doesn't ask him about the queer part. They ask him about the sort of writing himself into the comic part. But I thought for sure there was going to be at least one academic article that was like queer theory and something is killing the children.
Yeah. So
Or,
I went looking. And if this is your first episode of Super Context, I'm a librarian. That's what I do. And I could not find anything that put a critical eye onto Tinion's work as a queer artist.
Hmm.
I found a few things that mentioned that he was um, a creator with a high profile that you could check out and you would see yourself in his comics. Like there
Mm-hmm.
was a
Mm-hmm.
online magazine that said top 5, queer hero comic series, and Tinian was in 2 of them. And
Okay.
um, but yeah, no one did what I expected, which is really unpack the fact that James is a semi-closeted queer character
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
essentially made a pass at one of his friends who was also gay,
Yeah.
who said, "No, I just want to be friends." And then, in the midst of that kind of frustration and confusion, or at least disappointment in the way he's connecting, he manifests a monster that kills all his friends.
Right. Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
at school, uh, someone says, "You killed them because you thought they were hot and they wouldn't sleep with you, so you tore their heads off," which is possibly the most intense part of the book, even
Mm-hmm.
when there's a young girl torn in half by a praying mantis looking monster. Um, and when he talks about these big feelings and these things that he's had to deal with, the fact that his character, his namesake character that he's placed in this comic book, is accused of being a filthy, deviant, pervert murderer,
Yeah.
pretty much
Yeah.
because he's gay, that seems like something that you should unpack.
I would think so. And something just popped in my head because you read his stuff more closely than I do now. The Deviant, isn't that kind of the plot of that too? That
For
like,
sure.
yeah.
All of the main characters in the Deviant are gay and are dealing with their gay identity. And the
And one of
fact,
them is accused of being a serial killer.
yep.
Yeah. Okay. Um, well, so Multiversity Comics, they are interviewing Tinian about this comic, and they point out, like, okay, this character is named James. He has dark hair. You have dark hair. He's wearing glasses. You wear glasses. He's wearing a Batman shirt. You write Batman. He lives in Wisconsin. How much of this character is and isn't you? And Tinian laughs and he tells the story again about the truth or dare thing and how he wrote it that way. Um, but then in another interview, he says, I was like, these are just going to be filler names. Because sometimes when you're writing a book, some of the characters come fully formed and some of them, form themselves as you move along. And then he didn't move from there. He said, I've opened this up. It made me feel like there was a tiny version of myself and it made me really frightened for him. And then another later interview, he says, this started off as lazy writing. I'm going to be upfront about it. But when I was trying to find the character at the heart of this, I did shorthand. Sometimes I'll throw in names just to have one, and sometimes it will be because this character is kind of like my friend. I just start typing, and my friend does this and that. By the time it's ready to go, I'll change the name. But what he's not addressing here is like, okay, the name's the same. But clearly, somebody told the artist, draw this kid with glasses just like mine, hair the same color as mine, and a Batman t shirt.
Well, if Werther and James were able to discuss this, he could probably say, this worked. I made them,
Yeah.
me and my friends. Here's some pictures of us when we were kids.
Right. And like maybe there's like kind of some catharsis about doing that. I'm not sure, but it seems I mentioned this earlier when we talked about that truth or dare scene. Like I feel like that's the linchpin of the series. That is the scene that everything else kind of spreads out from. Yeah, I'm just surprised it's because it's such a real, touching, character-based moment. I'm surprised that there's so
Yeah.
little insight into it.
And there really seems like there should be at least one critical lit studies article that talks about how a queer not hero, a queer lead character with the same name as the queer writer is complicit in the creation of the monster that kills all his friends, and he
Yeah.
feels like it's his fault. Uh, and it seems like it's because he's half in love with his friends, but also
Hmm.
it's the writer killed all of those kids.
Right.
There's a lot to unpack there, and there
There
should
is.
be an article that I can
Yeah.
reference the abstract here,
Yeah.
but there's not, which is strange.
Look,
And
if
another,
you're in graduate school right now and you
yeah, now's the
can
time.
make
Yeah.
this fit your discipline, this is your way to getting published.
You know what another absence is? I didn't find anybody talking about how this book needed to be banned or challenged in
Same.
libraries or anything like that.
That's exactly right. That was the first thing I thought. Why? All of the censorship going on with libraries right now, it's rampant. It's more than it ever has been before, banned books. This
This is,
this book was literally called Something is Killing the
yeah,
Children gets passed over. That goes to show you, right? Because the stuff that they're focusing on is queer identities. And it doesn't say anything about that on the cover of this book, even
right.
though it is in here.
So this is all strategies. Like we're not talking about queer identity because that's going to get our book
Yeah.
about killing children
Oh,
violently
murdering
taken out
children?
of the
That's fine.
library.
As long as they're not transgender, we're okay with it, right? Like that, I guess that's what these folks are thinking. But yeah, I was surprised too. There's very little resistance from the market, from the publishers, from the public. Yeah. I
Okay.
mean, I talked about that a little earlier, right, with some of the ways that the reviews handled it. But I guess it means that there's more of a desire for this kind of horror now than maybe there was before, or at least there's more acceptance of it.
Ooh, I've got some of that in the notes for a little bit later. Let's get to the end here because I want you to talk about this moment that you've discussed. We've talked about the production of the comic, talked about how it was consumed and received. We touched on representation and regulation and how there's not been a lot that, kind of dipped into those
Mm.
two things. When we get to identity and themes, you say it was difficult for me to find a theme as we traditionally defined it. Explain yourself.
Yeah, so I've been mentioning like there seem to be several key things missing from a lot of the articles that we researched for this. And this was the third one. Like there didn't seem to be any kind of critical analysis or depth to how does this story help us make meaning?
Mm-hmm.
More of it was just like this is cool. Kind of like that with that one Reddit post. Like
Yeah.
it's cool, there's a lot of gore. It's good enough for me. Um so yeah, like I wanted to ask some questions of us, and actually, like I think where we've gotten to so far with this episode, we've answered a lot of these already, right? So there is stuff in here. I just don't think that I don't think it's the book's fault. I think it's the fault of the
Yeah.
people reviewing it.
This is almost a little bit of inside baseball for super context. We love to just talk about what we think and what a work makes us think of, but we like to have a framework, a climbing dome built out of citable and carefully constructed assessments.
There is our critical analysis versus the critical analysis of the sort of popular response
Yeah.
to a thing. And I
Let's be
think
honest, those are
you
uncritical
Well,
analyses.
that's where I'm going with this is like, I wonder if it's just that like the subgenre of comics journalism doesn't afford the writers the opportunity to go deep with how they analyze a thing. And because I think there is stuff to talk about here. We've been talking about it.
Yeah.
So like here's a question I would ask if I was writing a piece on this. What's the voice of this story? How does the creator's worldview peek through the story? I mean, I think we've talked about that in a little
Yeah.
bit, right? Like his queer identity is clearly peeking through the trauma that comes along with that of the way maybe like mean kids reacted
Yeah.
to him.
The voice is the voice of the witnesses to traumatic events in the world
Yeah. Or
and
um
survivor guilt.
yes. Yeah, 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 exactly. And then, like, what does this story mean beyond the events that are described to us? What's the meaning of this story? I think you're hitting the nail on it, right? Survivor guilt, trauma, um, resilience,
Yeah.
maybe.
And the fear that I feel like this is almost a millennial saying to a boomer, okay, I'm starting to be worried that I'm doing it to myself.
What, unpack that.
So older generations, I'm going to try and maintain people's privacy. So I was present in a group of folks who are of the boomer generation,
Mm,
and they were all saying essentially, I didn't have trauma like the kids are talking about today. Some bad shit happened and I dealt with it. Yeah, my dad was a drunk. Yeah, my mom, almost died in a car crash. Yeah, depression or whatever.
sure.
But
Yeah.
I just dealt with it. You stand up under that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
And younger people were then saying back, you understand that that's trauma, right? That happened to you. You should process that so you don't
Yeah.
have a heart attack or get cancer or yell at us.
Right. In that, I see where you're going with this now. Yeah. In that our generation, well, some people in our generation and younger are recognizing more that the emotional impact of events in your past affect your body in the present
Yeah.
and how you respond to events in the present.
And that explicitly sucking it up and handling it without
Yeah.
having to talk to somebody or breaking down or something, it could actually be terrible for you. But then this is almost like saying, if you talk about it, it'll come back and cut you in half.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah,
But
that
again,
there's almost like a purposeful avoidance of talking about
yeah, yeah.
why the horror works.
If that kid hadn't told the story of the monster that scared him in his head, it wouldn't have come to life and
Yeah,
killed his friends. But also, that's just me kind of like trying to find a connection,
right.
you know?
Well, there's a little bit here that I tried to pull together for you and I to try to come to a consensus here as we close out the episode. Um, AIPT, they write a little bit about the child death throughout the series. And they say fear, horror, and the promise of violence is what the cover of this book promises you as a reader. It evokes a lot of emotions, and not just the horrible kind. There's a magnetism that seeps into your mind and pulls up the fond nostalgia of youth until it's not fond anymore. We all had monsters that terrorized us as children. One of the greatest questions we all faced was, were they real or imaginary?
This is going back to the monster in the closet in Stephen King's The Dead Zone.
Oh, yeah.
You remember that?
I vaguely remember it because we also talk about this with Cujo. I think the monster there's the serial killer from the Dead Zone shows up as a ghost in the closet in Cujo, right?
Is that right? Oh gosh, that is it.
Yeah. I think
Oh my
that's what you're
gosh, I've
doing. You're
totally mashed
mixing
them
the two
together. Yeah,
things
yeah,
up.
yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a serial killer who, when he's about to be caught, he kills himself. But then, next book in Stephen King's universe, uh, he's the ghost in the closet,
Yeah.
and that kid dies, but not having anything to do with the ghost in the closet.
Right. Yeah, right. Yeah, that is like ancillary to the story about this monster dog. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And
Um
this quote you pulled from How to Love Comics, AJ Zender wrote, as children, we are all haunted by our own monsters, boogeyman hiding in the darkness of our closets beneath our beds. As we age, those fears never really go away. Horror comics that access this primal, deep seated fear tend to be the ones that stand out in our memories. And this comic literally posits that if you're young, if you're a kid, you can see monsters that adults can't see, which is
Yeah.
what you're always afraid of as a child.
Yeah. Or that the trauma that the adults have of having to grow up in the modern world, their trauma is what's keeping them from even seeing what's going on.
Right. They're distracted by other stuff that's not so important to you, the kid.
Yeah.
And in this piece, they also mention that there's literally a totem of fear and damage that all the hunters carry with them. You become a hunter if you kill the monster that terrorizes you. And
Yeah.
then you take its ghost and you put it into a cute little stuffed animal. And then that's your hunter totem.
Yeah. The quote here is these characters literally carry their trauma with them at every step, using them as guides and monster encyclopedias. It's a thrilling discussion of trauma, showcasing how it binds itself to a person. These totems represent the way that the horrors we experience in life never really leave us. I guess that's what I would say um, when I go back to the first quote that we gave in this section, the AIPT one, where they say, we all had monsters that terrorized us as children, and one of the greatest questions we all faced was they were they real or imaginary? I don't face that question. Mine were absolutely real. I know they were real. I
Okay.
mean, yes, I was afraid of the boogeyman being under the bed, but the trauma that I carry now is from real things that happened.
Right. This is the kids who think there's a monster in their closet might also have an alcoholic parent.
Yeah. Yeah. Or the kids who have the monster in their closet, alternatively, haven't built up any resilience to any kind of adversity. And so they imagine fear at every corner, right? So that's another possibility. Which all of it, which comes back to like this, the thing that we circle around on super context pretty much every episode, right? Which is like the Grant Morrison horror is an inoculation.
Inoculation, right?
Yeah, or for me, it's horror builds resilience to trauma.
We've got this one more quote from is that Comic Book Review, CBR
Comic book resources.
resources, um, and they lay out a lot about how kids as the victim pool of a story make it more affecting. But in this case, in the story, you can't, as a child, you can't rely on the adults because they can't see what's wrong. They can't see the thing coming for you.
Hmm.
And in fact, the authority that can stop the monster ultimately becomes um, an aggressor to the town because the monster hunters also engage in cover ups.
Yeah, yeah.
So if you tell your story to someone hoping that they'll help you, there's a good chance that that person will kill you so that you can't tell the story to anybody else.
Okay, let me try to unpack this here. I don't know that this is intentional on the author's part, but I just thought of a through line here,
Okay.
which is this comic proposes three ways of responding to traumatic events. There is the way the citizens respond, the parents of these children, which is they freeze up, right?
Yeah.
They're incapable of action.
Grief, and despair.
The House of Slaughter people do everything that they can to sweep it under the rug and tamp down their emotions and keep from having a response and keep from anybody else knowing that something traumatic happened.
Yep.
And then Erica is part of that, but is also trying to um, do the right thing by the victims that are left behind.
Yeah. Tries to
And
talk to them and treat them like partners in the process of making things right.
and enable them to have the tools to be more resilient in the future, right? And even within that, she has clearly not processed her own trauma, right? She is clearly damaged and in some ways toxic because of her
Yeah.
trauma.
She's literally physically damaged, but also She's refusing to play by the rules of her hunter organization, and she's actually expelled at the end of this storyline, and she's on
Yeah.
the run. This leads to Tinian's explanation of why he thinks this story is important, not just to him, but to everybody. This is from the panel by panel piece on Something is Killing the Children. Tinian says, I think we're living through a raw, frightening moment in history that is best reflected by raw, frightening stories. And I want to be very specific here. Despite the fact that this is the March 2020 issue of Panel by Panel, it was released February 26th. I have no doubt that that interview was more than a few days before the release of the issue. So he's not talking about COVID.
He's
He's
talking
talking about
about
Trump.
the first Trump administration.
Yeah. Uh, and so he says, it feels like audiences are more willing to check out something outside the box in horror where they might be more conservative in other genres. It reflects the larger fears of society. And we have a lot of fears right now. The sheer noise and trauma of living in this world day to day is overwhelming. It's never just one thing we're afraid of, but we're afraid of everything, and for good reason. The old systems feel like they're falling apart, and it feels like everyone all at once remembered the rules of society are just tenuous agreements that can be ignored outright. I feel like the world has left us kind of primed for horror. A horror story is a safe way to interact with that fear and give it a face and a name. I reading that, I'm suddenly like, oh my God, this is a an allegory for the breaking of all the political process norms by the election of 2016 and the administration that followed.
So, yeah, let me try to take this a little and run with it. It's weirdly prescient because all of this is true of where we were at when he was interviewed for this piece. But at the same time,
Yeah, just
so
wait.
much more has happened in the last 6 years. Um, and I think I think what I would say is collectively we have all been traumatized by the events of the last, it's a decade now.
Mm-hmm.
We've been playing this game for 10 years now. Um and when I say all of us, I don't just mean progressives, leftists, liberals. I think the people on the right are traumatized too. They don't know how to express it, and the way in which their traumas are manifesting are um, hysterical or revisions of history. But I think we're all responding to the trauma of the last 10 to 15 years. Um, and I think he's right. It's funny because just before we started recording, Charlie and I were talking about the events of the last week. Again, we're recording this on January 12th in 2026. Um, and we were just saying, like, we're kind of, how did you phrase it? Like, we've all just kind of come to accept this insanity. And I said, I'm so tired. I'm just
Yeah,
exhausted. Behind all of that is sort of this like, how are we going to get through this?
yeah,
And I think what Tinian is arguing here is that horror stories like Something is Killing the Children are um, preparing us for how we're going to get through it. And are tools for, again, like I keep using the term resilience. It's very kind of like a self-helpy term, but maybe this is it, you know? Maybe we need to take a lesson from this.
but also there's a the other side of it is well, what you found in this piece from Doom Rocket.
Oh yeah, this was interesting.
Yeah, the continuing the constant trauma, the constant attacks, the constant insecurity turns into what Clyde Hall at Doom Rocket calls hyper vigilant demeanors. Hypervigilance serves as a way of recognizing and assessing threats, acting preemptively to lessen them, parsing anything that distracts. It makes relaxing difficult, keeps emotions muted, and invokes the capacity to listen rather than share. And there's some like
Hi.
good stuff. There's
Hello.
yeah, I see you, Chris. Um, there's some things that are good. You know, someone who listens rather than shares is sort of a more compassionate or useful person to another traumatized person. But also, acting preemptively to lessen threats is also called freaking out.
Yeah, sometimes. Um, I've definitely been diagnosed as hypervigilant. And the pop culture way in which I think about it, have your kids gotten into the Harry Potter movies yet?
Yeah, some of them
So you know this character Mad Eye Moody?
I do.
Mad Eye Moody is, to me, he's like the dictionary definition of hypervigilance. Um, and the funny thing is, like, he's hyper vigilant, and then like in the Harry Potter stories, he still gets like blindsided, kidnapped, and replaced, right? So he's like right to be hyper vigilant in this world that he exists in. Um, it's funny, like, just I mean, I put these notes in yesterday, and just reading that those two sentences again, like, I see myself in them in how I responded to this book and how I responded in this episode, right? Like, assessing threats, how critical I was of the
Yeah,
publishers.
in this case, it's calling bullshit, is
Yeah,
assessing threats to your integrity.
yeah. Acting preemptively to lessen them, same thing, right? Parsing anything that distracts. That's exactly it. Relaxing, difficult, check. Keeps emotions muted. That I don't identify with. I think my emotions are pretty, as you or anybody listening to the show can attest to. I'm
Well,
not.
that's what you just described as being so tired.
Yeah, yeah. And I like to think that I lean into the capacity to listen rather than share. I try. I try to. Um, but sometimes it's hard, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes like our nervous systems are so triggered that like we end up wanting to tell our story rather than listen to other people's stories. I think it's worth noting here that Clyde Hall, it sounds like he has military experience. He compares it to PTSD for soldiers and emergency service workers. Um, Such a state evolves through serious trauma like boot camp or the never popular battlefield baptism where safety is not guaranteed. There are different levels of trauma and different things that traumatize, right? But the human body somewhat responds to them similarly. But he says exactly what you just mentioned. The longer this is maintained, the more exhausting it becomes. It causes compartmentalization, eradication of relationships. It alienates you from others. It enhances feelings of victimization, your situation costing connections most people would cherish. Unchecked and depending on the individual, it leads to PTSD, antisocial tendencies, and suicidal thoughts.
So, in essence, instead of a hero, a hunter, which is something that Tinian talks about the story, uh, the character that would be the hero is suffering from hypervigilance and all of the associated symptoms. And instead of being asked to identify with that character or to identify with a character in that position who doesn't have any of the realistic responses, the audience are allowed to identify with the shocked bystander who doesn't understand what's happening, doesn't know how this could have happened, and is watching someone else try to deal with it. So it's the training wheels for dealing with the constant and unprecedented damage of COVID or a Trump administration or just being a fucking parent.
You've been listening to Super Context, a podcast autopsy of media.
How it's made and how it informs our everyday culture.
Our theme music is Human Factor by Mile Marker.
And you're listening to Drive Fast by 3 Chain Links.
All show notes are available at patreon.com/supercontext.
And you can email the show at supercontextpodcast@gmail.com.
I'm available on Blue Sky as @ChristianSager.
And I am not available. I have a scorched earth policy on social media.
2 N's, 2 T's.